warm welcome to all the distinguished participants, guests, panelists, and everyone who is participating in Dhaka Tribune seminar on Common Ground, How to Get to Free and Fair Elections, supported by the Royal Norwegian Embassy, Dhaka. As we all know, the election is nearby, and our surrounding is filled with both excitement and concern. Thus, to get better insight, we have a reputable group of panelists with us today. It is an honor for me to introduce Sharmeen Murshid, the CEO of Broti. Then we have MP Nahim Razzaq, a member of Parliamentary Standing Committee on Ministry of Foreign Affairs, followed by the International Affairs Secretary, Barrister Rumeen, and lastly we have Zonayed Saki, the Chief Coordinator of Kono Shanghodi Andolon. This seminar will be moderated by the Editor-in-Chief of Dhaka Tribune, Mr. Zafar Sobhan. Now I would like to invite our special guest, Honorable Ambassador of the Royal Norwegian Embassy, His Excellency Espen Richter Svensson, to come to the podium and share the opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, members of parliament, there are so many distinguished guests and excellencies and colleagues, friends, experts, everybody, a very, very good morning to you, and thank you so much for attending our event today. Elections hold great importance in every democratic nation, and to organize an election is a challenging task for every country, including Bangladesh, with its population of 170 million people and well over 100 million voters. This makes it one of the largest democracies in the world and entails lots of votes to count and register and verify and all of those things. The run-up to a democratic election is a long chain of important events. There is an appointment of an election commission, there are technical preparations, there are preparations of electoral roll, logistical arrangements, etc., etc. And then, not least, there are the political preparations, including the parties' political campaigns. All these events matter. The key to good, free and fair elections lie in the preparations, which is why we talk about the upcoming elections long before they're actually due to take place. We need to pay attention to the whole chain of events, as a disruption early in the chain can potentially derail, delay or destroy the whole process. Elections are pivotal to a democracy. It's life and death. It's birth and development. It's rejuvenation and new life. Through a well-organized, free and fair election, legitimacy is granted to the winners, enabling them to take the country forward in line with their pledges to the voters. At the moment, we are still in relatively early phases of the preparations here in Bangladesh, but time is running fast, and we see challenges in many directions. I will not dive into details, but I think it's very important not to lose momentum, and this is one of the main reasons why we are gathered here today. I'm very grateful to Dhaka Tribune and Zafar Sobhan for taking the initiative to do this and to bring together the group of people we have here. We have experts and stakeholders, actors and observers, analysts, diplomats, you name it. And we are very happy from my embassy to enable this kind of discussions. Diplomats are perceived sometimes as talkers, and some are indeed eminent. But in my opinion, diplomats are even better when they make other people talk. And that's what we're hoping for today. In today's seminar, we are seeking to bring together political parties, civil society, experts and journalists to discuss the road ahead in the election preparations. And I would like to encourage everybody to use this opportunity to listen to each other, especially to the people in this room you might not totally agree with. Listening builds trust, prevents misunderstandings, and creates ground for progress. At least that's my theory, and it's what I hope to have confirmed today. Also, let me say, before concluding, that I see in this room several young people, and I see a fairly acceptable gender balance. I want especially to hear from those two groups, you know, the young people and also the gender which is least represented here. So on that happy note and optimistic, I must say, I'm very grateful to you all for being here. I will be listening, and I hope that we can, through this discussion, make some progress in some respects. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your insights on the matter. Now, without any further ado, I would request the moderator to begin the seminar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Espen. The Norwegian embassy here in Dhaka has been a strong partner of the Dhaka Tribune. We have put together a number of seminars over the years, and I really appreciate your commitment and dedication to helping us platform these debates, which are necessary to address these issues which we have here in Bangladesh. And of course, this is merely in line with a long and proud tradition which Norway and Bangladesh have of friendship and partnership. So thank you so much. Thank you to the panelists for giving us your time this morning. 10 o'clock in the morning is challenging, I understand, especially when it is the day right after the second World Cup semi-final. So thank all of you for making the effort. I think I see a few bleary eyes. I'm suspecting a lot of people are here on a few hours less sleep than they would otherwise have enjoyed. So it's much appreciated. But the point that's been made is correct. It may seem as though the next election is a long time away, but I think it's never too early to really start this discussion as to how we can get to the kind of election that Bangladesh needs, that the Bangladeshi people deserve. Democracy has always been at the heart of the Bangladesh story. The people's voice, people's representation. This is what gave us our independence. Tomorrow is the anniversary of Victory Day, and which is also another reason why this is a perfect opportunity to really take the time to really talk about what is at the heart of Bangladesh as a country. And we have a strong and proud democratic history, and it's very important, I think, to the Bangladeshi people and who Bangladesh is and what we are as a country to really ensure that our democracy is as functional as possible. And I think it is absolutely crucial to the development and governance, good governance of this country moving forward. We have many challenges facing us in the world. 2023 is just around the corner. The coming years and decades will be extraordinarily challenging for us regionally, globally as a country. And we really need the strength of being a functional democracy to face up and deal with all of the adversity and take our place on the global stage as we deserve, as is needed as a country. Without further ado, let me start with Sharmeen Sharmeen Murshid, who is probably well known to many of you, is the CEO of Broti, who have been working very closely in terms of elections, in terms of securing democratic rights in Bangladesh for many decades. I can think of no better person to kickstart this discussion for us and really sort of lay out a foundation for this conversation than Sharmeen Appa. So without further ado, why don't you go ahead. Oh, I should, before I pass on to Sharmeen Appa, let me just explain a little bit about the format. I'm going to give all of our speakers about 7 to 10 minutes for introductory comments. Afterwards, I will let them respond to one another. we'll have a second round of discussion, and after about an hour, we're looking for about 2 hours for this discussion, 2 hours plus, we will open it out to the participants, all of you sitting in the audience, and the idea being that this should be a conversation. You have all been invited, handpicked here to be part of this conversation, not just to listen, so please do feel free to share your thoughts, your ideas, your observations, questions if you have them. And what will make this a successful dialogue, a successful discussion, as far as I'm concerned, is to the extent we're really able to all participate. So on that note, Sharmeen Appa, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Zafar. Salam to everyone, and a very good morning. I was listening to the Norwegian ambassador. He said, he talked about listening. And in my mind, listening is the first step towards finding common ground. If we don't listen to one another, we don't understand one another. And if we don't understand one another, we don't find common grounds. The subject we are presented here with is common ground, how to get to a free and fair elections. Just a word about my organization. We've been observing elections for 20 plus years. And looking at the wave, the electoral rise and fall of the system brings in many questions. And I think we've come to a point today here in 2022 where all of that learning has to be brought onto the table to address what we are experiencing today. So common ground, I think that's a very important word here. And according to the Cambridge Dictionary, I want to talk about this. Shared interest, beliefs, opinions between two people or group of people who disagree about most other things, find a space of agreement. Find a space of agreement when they do not agree about any other thing. Now, common ground is possible if each party looks to increase understanding and appreciation of the other. And this is where I thought what the start of what the ambassador said was so important, listening. And common ground is very difficult when even before negotiations have begun, you've already decided your position and the other person on the other side, and automatically you turn them into your opposite. Now, common ground and how can we use it as a communication tool to become better at conflict resolution? And I think that is the broad reason why we are talking about common ground. And conflict resolution refers to our electoral experience and the conflicts that have arisen over the years. And of course, arriving at a common ground would mean employing the art of negotiation in a way to settle differences and find agreements on a compromise. Now the question is, Bangladesh is in the brink of a crisis, of a political turmoil. There are people who may underplay that, and there may be people who will overplay that. But let us agree that Bangladesh is in a political crisis, and we are at a turning point. And this needs to be reasonably, rationally addressed. To look at the electoral process in this country, I will quickly ask you to just glance through how did we emerge. We as a nation emerged as a result of a government not wanting to transfer power. That was in 1970. There was an election, a fair election, the people won, the government did not want to transfer power. And what did that lead to? radicalization, and an extreme divide which led to a war of freedom. That is the legacy that the people of Bangladesh carry. That's where our psychology, our psyche, our political psyche is honed in. So in that journey, when we became an independent nation, we had dreams. We're talking about common ground. Do we people sitting here, I see a cross-section of our representatives from the political divide. Do we believe that we can achieve a common ground? Now, here's my question. Zafar has presented me, asked me to speak on common ground and how to reach a free and fair election. I ask you, have we reached a decision to arrive at a common ground? Now, that is fundamental to actually walking the road towards common ground. Now, if I ask you all here, I wonder how many of you truly believe that it is possible to arrive at a common ground. Today, in 2022, December 15, I think if we can come to that conclusion that yes, we can arrive at a common ground, that's the first breakthrough. And then we can start working out how we're going to arrive at that. Now, as I was quickly saying, common ground means, as I see it, and I'm sure you will speak your mind, if I were to say what was my common ground with all of you here, my common ground is my constitution. And we have a value system, written in gold in the constitution. That is my common ground. I politically would not differ with any of my citizens on that ground because we all accepted that constitution as the constitution of this land, and the ideological premise inscribed there. We talk about democracy, we talk about socialism, we talk about a secular governance, not secularism, secular governance. I make that distinction because very often, all too often, we misread that word. And nationalism, which I view as patriotism. Now, democracy, people's governance, democracy can be achieved if people are represented in the governance, and people rule. We all know that. I know these are fundamental things. I'm sorry, I hope I'm not taxing your patience, but I would like to raise these questions because I think it logically follows, where we need to put our focus. Now, democracy means fair elections, a process of selecting my representative according to my choice. And for that, I need an election system. And everyone in this room agrees. That's a common ground. Everyone in this room agrees that election is the way to transfer of power and good governance. So that would be our common ground. And a free and fair election is what would give a true representation of the people in governance. And this electoral system process has to be played by some rules, some regulations. That's our common ground. Everyone here agrees that only through very disciplined rules can we establish democracy and people's participation. And it is only through a good legal framework and good rules to the game can we deliver an electoral system that will truly have my representative there in the parliament. That's our common ground. And I'm sure what I say here, nobody here will dispute. So, to find this, the common ground is possible when we have those basic common understandings. Now, in the process, in our historical process, we learned two things. One is whether you're a military government or whether you're a civil government, governments in power are not willing to transfer power. They are not willing to step down. And that's a historical fact, and nobody can disagree with that. And we have seen that again and again. So to say the military governments were undemocratic is not sufficient. We need to also recognize with honesty and truthfulness that our civil governments have done a poor job in building a democratic society, in building democratic institutions, and have done poorly in actually organizing elections. Now, if we are to assess the elections that have happened in free, liberated Bangladesh from 1973 onwards today till 2022, there are only 3 elections that we can truly call acceptable, free, and fair. One in 1991, which happened under an interim electoral government, interim government, and one in 2008, and 2001. Now, mind you, these elections were flawed. There were flaws. There was violence. There was, and I'm a witness to many of those facts in 2001. And even in 2008, which is a high point in our electoral achievement, in the management of elections, Bangladesh can be proud of what it had done in 2008 and even in 1991. And yet, there were flaws. But the question is, are we improving? I would say in those elections, we had markedly improved the quality of managing the elections and in delivering an election which people perceived as being fair and acceptable, and that is important. How did people perceive this? They perceived these to be as free and fair. Now, 2008 and 1991, 2001, and 2008 are really hallmarks for us. We need to take lessons from that. Now, if we look at what made these work and what made the others not work, I can give lots of examples of where people questioned the electoral processes conducted by our civil governments and military governments, of course. Now, we find that a government in power, sitting in power, conducting an election, has proved not to be free and fair in comparison to elections held under interim governments and caretaker governments. I know, politically, when we talk about the caretaker government, and I say this, whoever is in power negates the importance of the caretaker government, and whoever is in the opposition wants the caretaker government. The present government came to power under the caretaker government in 2008. And there was a great movement for it. There was a movement for a new electoral role. We, the civil society, contributed towards the understanding and study of that. And a new electoral role was made. Today, in 2022, I can tell you, we've been monitoring the electoral roll for many years. I've given up. Why? Because there's no transparency. We don't get the information from the Election Commission. We don't know what the state of the electoral roll at present is. Now, the electoral roll, in our mind, was one of the key factors why false votes occur. That needs to be clean. And today, standing here in 2022, just by the by, I want to say the electoral roll needs a revisit. So, again, the high point and the low point. 2018 is our low point. No one, those who are in power and those who are not in power, cannot deny that 2018 is a low point. And in that low point, what did we do wrong? My assumption, my hypothesis, or my validation from what I say to you is governments in power have a different view of democracy when they're in power, and they have a different view of democracy when they're not in power. Now, how do you negotiate that? Now, today, there is a lot of soul searching to be done by the government in power. Now, somebody asked me, do you think this election commission will deliver? If I look at past record, I would be impulsive to say, no, it cannot deliver. Why? Because it will not be allowed to deliver. Now, election commission has great powers, yet it cannot deliver. Today, we as election observers, I'll cut it short, I'm sure Zafar.
Go ahead.
Okay. As an election observer, for the past 20+ years, what we've tried to do is watch an election a week ahead of the elections, during the elections, and about a week after the elections. But let me tell you, standing here in 2022 of December 15, I believe we need to start observing now. We need to observe the whole of 2023 because the electoral environment is already subjected to many anomalies. And I think when I speak in this manner, I would like my friends sitting in the government to bear with what we are saying and do the listening that our ambassador talked about, so that you may understand where we come from. And if you do not do that, then we are going to be in the brink of a crisis. And so having said that, what we have seen over the past months, opposition, position, there is direct conflict. This is not desirable. This is not desirable in a democracy, and this is just calling for huge marginalization, widening the divide. So I think in that situation, this calling for common grounds is absolutely timely, and we need to think about this very deeply. Now, if the instruments of the state become politicized, and let me tell you, I again repeat, we have been sinful in doing this for the last 50 years. What we see today in 2022 is only a culmination of a culture that we, the people of Bangladesh, should not have allowed to happen in the first place. We allowed it. And now it's time for us to bring the political parties to reason. How can you, common ground, negotiations, understanding, these are words of reason. And how can you talk to people if they are in dichotomy, opposite, sitting in opposite positions? If the tolerance level, the political tolerance level has shrunk, I, a representative of the civil society, let me tell you candidly, the voice of the civil society has shrunk. And we need to ask why this is so. Why is there fear? Why is there fear to speak? Why is there fear to speak the truth? Why is there, people go to, I've been going to the media, as I said, for the last 21 years. Process. I see the change. People don't speak their minds anymore. So the right to expression, we are self-restricting. This speaks of an environment. And this environment is not an environment conducive to free thinking, free expression, and therefore a democratic environment. So my appeal would be, and I'm going to wrap this up. I know I've raised a lot of questions, and our political friends here are going to say a lot of things, so I'm not going to go into that. So I, from my position, want to raise these historical mistakes that we have made. And in 2022, we are at a turning corner. I look at it not as a crisis. I look at it as a call, a wake-up call for us to address this with wisdom and not allow the kind of violence I fear will be unleashed. Opposition must not be harassed. Political environment must be made conducive so that everyone can participate. Freedom to assembly, And who knows better than Awami League? Awami League has been fighting for these rights from donkey's years. Who knows better than Awami League the importance of the right of expression, the importance of the freedom of speech, importance of right to assembly? How many times have they been beaten up, thrown into the jail? Then what is the psychology? Is it that do unto others what they have done unto me? Where will this stop? So my appeal is that we rethink, we look inwards, we take initiatives, and we find spaces where we can speak fearlessly. And I think it's extremely important, I'm sorry I'm saying this, that it is important for the international community to also come forward and be a part of that process. Because our history shows that left to ourselves, we don't, sometimes we make mistakes which we shouldn't. Now, the demands from the oppositions are clear. Why they want the caretaker government, why they want an interim government. Historically, it's clear. Governments in power do not want to hand over power, full stop. That's a historical fact. And we are living that legacy. So my question would be to the government, how do you plan to hold the 2023 elections? Because I, as a civil society member, even I don't know how it's going to happen. But we will monitor, we will study it, we will look at it, we will appeal, we will urge reason to prevail, and for everyone to sit together. So this event is extremely important. What is the role of the civil society? You asked the second question, how to get to a free and fair elections? Well, how can we make the government understand and the opposition understand they've got to sit together, we've got to find a mechanism by which we've got to have an election which is peaceful. And my understanding is violence and legal irregularity are two major obstructions in free and fair participation of people, voters, and there's ample evidence. I will conclude by saying the civil society, and Zafar, thank you so much for triggering this discussion, must sit together again and again and again and start monitoring the process, start pointing out to the government and to the opposition, and we start urging them to sit together. We don't want to see you in the streets. We don't want to see our people being shot down. We don't want any deaths. I, as an election observer, am tired of recording the number of deaths during elections. I'm tired of recording violences in elections. We want respite. We want our politicians to see reason. Thank you. I've been emotional. Please forgive me, but I think my appeal rests with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharmeen. I knew I had made the right decision to start the batting with you, so to speak. You did a really great job of contextualizing democracy and how it is Bangladesh's birthright, our patrimony, if you will, and of course pointing out that in the past we have been on far more solid and workable democratic ground than we are today. And so it's not a question of constant development and evolution. In many ways we may have gone backwards over the last few years, and that's something, it's really just a question of going back to where we were in building on the earlier gains. I think you raise a lot of great points. You have, and I think how to get to the common ground, what are the obstacles, what needs to be done on all sides, the government, the opposition, those of us in civil society, those of us in the media. Everyone has a role to play. That is what we really want to get into the weeds of in this discussion today. I'm going to bring in Saki as our next speaker, is a recognition of the fact that, of course, political discussions here in Bangladesh do tend to revolve around the two major parties. You have the Awami League and the BNP. But of course, there are other voices, and I think it's important to bring them into the discussion to hear what they have to say. Saki, why don't you go ahead and As I've mentioned before, and this is for all of you, feel free to speak Bangla, English, some combination of the two. The point is to get our points across, and that also goes to those of you in the audience who have points to make. If you wish to speak in Bangla, you wish to speak in English, it's all open. The point is we want to hear from everyone. Saki, over to you.
Dhanyabad Zafar Sobhan, সম্মানিত আলোচকবৃন্দ এবং সম্মানিত সুধীবৃন্দ, আমি আপনাদের সবাইকে সালাম এবং শুভেচ্ছা জানাচ্ছি। আমি বাংলায় বলতেই স্বাচ্ছন্দ্য বোধ করি, কিন্তু আজকে এখানে অনেক অতিথিদের একাংশ আছেন যাদের সুবিধার জন্য আমি খুব সংক্ষেপে আমার কিছু সারাংশ ইংরেজিতে বলবো। বাকি প্রশ্নোত্তর এবং আলোচনা আমি বাংলায় করতে চাইব। আপনাদের সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ। Respected moderator and speakers, honorable guests and the audience, please accept my salam and greetings to you all. Before I begin, I'd like to say that although I am comfortable in Bangla, but we are in the esteemed presence of members of the international community. That's why I'll try to give my key statement in brief in English, and in the following I'll prefer to speak in Bangla. Today our title is Common Ground, How to Get to Free and Fair Elections. If you ask, common ground for what? For free and fair elections. And after 50 years, all long 50 years of the heroic liberation war, I think this is not a matter of pride for us to discuss about for a free and fair election. Whereas even countries in the South Asia, all the countries in South Asia, they have an electoral system that can deliver a free and fair and acceptable election. So, but unfortunately, we have to discuss because this is the reality. We have election-centric crisis from the very beginning, and I like to say three things. First, I like to say what is the state of the crisis, and then what is its consequences, and finally, what is the way forward. So, first thing, we are a country from the very beginning. We have election-centric crisis. In 1996, there was a political consensus among the major political stakeholders that a caretaker government will hold the election, and we were then student activists, and we thought in that time, and we have seen in the following time that it was actually a temporary solution. But it was the only political consensus among the major political parties. Caretaker system faced some difficulties, especially in 2006, but it started, I think, from 2001. But instead of actually try to overcome these limitations of the caretaker government, Bangladesh Awami League, the party in power for the last 14 consecutive years, they abolished the caretaker system unilaterally by 15th Amendment of the Constitution. And what is the outcome? You all know the election of 2014, where 153 members of the parliament were elected before the election day. And in 2018, a midnight ballot stuffing election. And to me is the most shameful election in the history of this country, because all the political parties, almost all the political parties participated in that election, and after a grand national dialogue with the Prime Minister, and where she assured that trust on me, will deliver a free and fair election. But it didn't happen, and we saw that a midnight ballot stuffing election. So now the state of crisis is Bangladesh and Bangladeshi political parties. There is no trust between the parties, and no opposition parties believe that there will be a free and fair election under any political government. Not only under this government, under any political government, because given this constitution and ruling system, we will not have a free and fair election under any political partisan government. So, but Awami League is saying that this system will continue, and there is no scope for any interim or caretaker government. And the leaders are declaring that we'll remain in power up to 2041. And then we will think whether the people of Bangladesh will be given the rights of vote. So actually we are dealing with a problem of 19th century demand, almost 18th century demand, right to vote. So this is the status of the crisis. And now what will be the outcome of this, or the consequence of this crisis? One thing, I'll be brief. We all know huge plundering of public wealth in the name of mega project, mega corruption, and huge public wealth is giving to the hands of the cronies, and crony capitalism is the main feature of this country. Corruption, and there's no accountability, because by using the state power, these all are happening. And second thing, huge violation of human rights. We know enforced disappearance, extrajudicial killing, mass arrest, cases against the opposition leaders in huge numbers, thousands of cases. And you all know the recent events. So if it continues, I think the state will be more authorized. Already we are in a regime that is running with an authoritarian fashion, but I think if it continues, it will be hell. And third thing, the party in power, they don't only running the government with an authoritarian fashion, with force, they're justifying it. They're saying that they're upholding the spirit of liberation war and development. So by justifying and making it an ideological matter, they're actually dividing the nation, and by actually capturing the entire state, because millions of people are being denied their rights because of who they are, what is their political views. Only the government people, who are the supporter of this government, they're getting some scopes in government jobs, in businesses, in other fields. So there's a huge divide, an increasing divide among the people, and the state is being alienated from the people, because the fundamental thing of a state, the purpose of a state is to unite the people, although there's a lot of conflicts among the people, political views, class, race, and other social categories. So what I'm trying to say, the state is failing to fulfill the role of uniting agency, and not only that, state, what is the contract between the state and the citizens? Citizens are sovereign. It is the fundamental idea of the modern states and modern democracy. And Bangladesh Constitution actually upholded this view. The citizens are the sovereign. So the representatives of the citizens will govern the state, and voting is the only process to create this representative. If you snatch the voting right of the people, or taken away the voting rights of the people, you actually breach the contract, and state becomes alienated from the people. And a state alienated from the people can't unite the people, can't create a national unity, can't protect its sovereignty. On the contrary, it might go, or it might fall into the trap of being a failed state. So, considering these consequences, we must think with blood and sweat that we have to overcome this situation. And how to overcome? I think authoritarian rules have a strong bond with, I think authoritarian rule, to find out the route to democracy, we need to look at the roots of authoritarian rules in Bangladesh. If we try to look at the roots, we'll find it in the constitution. Yes, we have a constitution that have some political ideology and some declaration of our citizens' rights, but on the one hand, they're declaring the citizens' rights and dignity, but on the other hand, if you look at the power structure of the of the constitution, we'll find that it's absolutely autocratic. It's a constitutional autocracy. From the very beginning, we are seeing it's not an exception. So, what I'm trying to say that if we can establish the separation of power between the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, we will not create a situation or any condition to actually have proper institutions who will be able to deliver the free and fair elections. So we need this separation of power first. We had some relatively free and fair election under caretaker government, but it was a temporary solution, as I said earlier, because of this autocratic power structure. The government always have immense power, and they tried to manipulate the caretaker system also, and which we saw in 2001 and we saw in 2006, and that's why it faced that catastrophe. I said earlier that instead of developing it, the government came in power in 2009, Awami League, led by Awami League. they abolished the caretaker system and got back to the old system where only a party who actually wins, they take everything. Winners take all, and they have taken everything all, and it's unprecedented in Bangladesh. So what is my solution? What I'm proposing, we from our party Ganashanghati Andolan, People's Solidarity Movement, we have proposed 7 points reform program. I like to present it here. I think we need to address the necessity of power structure reform. Number one, the legislature. We need a proportional electoral system, because if you get one vote more, then you have everything. So if we want to have proper representation in the parliament, and if we want to prevent the monopoly in the parliament, then we have to go for a proportionate electoral system. It's not, the Westminster system is not the only model of modern democracy. I think the other democracies, especially in Europe and in other countries in the world, almost 70 to 80 countries in the world, they are actually having this proportionate electoral system. So number one, this. And we have to go for a huge reform of the electoral process to prevent the influence of the money, muscle, and the administrative influences. Second reform we need for the legislature, we need a bicameral parliament, and we need to separate the balance of power between the two houses. Then I come to the issue of the judiciary. We have to have really an independent judiciary. And we have to separate the judiciary, especially the lower court, from the executive. And we have to have a specific guideline, constitutional guideline provisions for the appointments of the upper court judges, that is High Court and Supreme Court. So this is very important thing. If we have a really independent judiciary, then well, there are conflicts between the political parties. It sometimes becomes very bloody. But what is the solution? Solution is you have to have an independent judiciary so that people get justice. So I think independent judiciary is one of the most important pillars. And second thing, one of the major problems that our constitutional bodies like Election Commission and other statutory bodies like the Auditor General's office, like the Attorney General office, another statutory body. I think if the appointing authority is Prime Minister in our constitution is actually whatever the different provisions the current government made. There is an election law, commission law, the president appoints some search committee, and they are searching the name of the people, and they're giving it to the president. But you know that in Bangladesh, president has no right without the Prime Minister's concern and consent to actually do any credible thing. So actual authority of appointing this post are the Prime Minister. So if we don't change it, the appointing authority, there will be no institution here because of the because of the last 50 years practices. So we need to change the appointing authority, and we are proposing that we'll have to have representation from the government, maybe the Prime Minister, from the leader of the opposition, or their representative, and the representative from the judiciary. And third thing, we need to go for a serious reform for the laws of the Financial Regulatory Authority and the Auditor General Office, and reform of the administration, especially police and civil service. And third, if we want, for the government side, we need to have a separation of power between the President and Prime Minister, because there is no separation actually. And second thing, in Bangladesh, the post of Prime Minister, the Chief Executive, this is absolutely unaccountable. There is no provision to bring him or her, the Prime Minister, under any accountable process. So we need to have the provisions of accountability of the Prime Minister. And we need to have other decentralization of ruling system, like we can go for a federal system, although I think it will be needed much discussion and unity among the political parties. And second thing, I think that local government, there's a interesting thing in our constitution that in English it was local government, and in Bangla the translation was Sthaniyo Shashon, the local administration. So you understand the difference. So actually, if we want to decentralize the power and the power structure, we have to have a powerful, empowered local government with serious, with budget authority, with collecting tax, the law enforcing matters, the education, the health should be in the hand of the local government. And last not the least, a constitutional guarantee for all the citizens, irrespective of the race, gender, religion, and other identities, so that the state would be bound to ensure their civil and human rights and dignity. You see, here in Bangladesh, we several times we heard the people of minorities, religious minorities or other minorities, they're being attacked by some goons or some quarters. But no, never the administration liable for this. They were never bring to the accountability and justice. So we have to have some guarantee constitutionally so that administration and government become liable for the attack. So now, if we want to go for these changes, we need the political unity among the political parties. I think these are becoming very important issues among the political parties. But if we go for these changes, the institution will not grow in the within a day or within some time. So we need we need a time. So that that's why I think one of the main necessity is we need a election time neutral government system again. We think that at least for 3 to 5 times, some parties are thinking that it should be a permanent system. Without that, even if we go for this constitutional reforms, we need time to grow the institutions and stand on its own feet. So for that reason, our demands are very clear. The government, the party in power must step down. And second thing, we need an interim government. The task will be 2 things. One, to create an atmosphere for free and fair elections, and to create and facilitate, an atmosphere and facilitate the process for the unity among the political parties for this reform program, so that the next parliament be bound to go for these reforms. And that's the solution that can really bring a common ground among the political parties. Awami League, a party with, they have long history, and they have the glory of leading the National Liberation War in 1971. And they had fought for voting rights once. But now they are proposing a political system which actually snatching or taking away the voting rights of the people. And they're saying that, okay, this is the only future of Bangladesh. I think it's very unfortunate for the party. They're not taking out the voting rights of the people in general. They're taking out the voting rights of their own members and supporters. So this is a huge moral lacking situation. Politically, I think it will lead them to the bankruptcy. And that's also a very bad thing for our country, for our political system. So I think the dignified legacy for Awami League will be to go and to respond to the demand from the opposition for the reform of the entire political system and to create a democratic polity and create a provision in this parliament. They have over 4/5 majority. They can create again the provision for election time neutral government. They can open up the discussion with the political parties, and after making this provision, they can step down by resigning to them. And that will actually lead us to a crisis-free Bangladesh. We are a party, we think we're a democratic party. We try to serve the interest of the people. We try to establish the justice and dignity of our people in Bangladesh. We are fighting for actually universal health care. We are fighting for universal education, educational rights. We are fighting for a productive economy. We are fighting for minimum wage, trade union rights. We are fighting for the oppressed and all kinds of marginalized people, for their rights and dignity. But nothing can be achieved within this system because government has no, what should I say? They have no compulsion to address the people's demands. They are fulfilling the demands of some groups of some power corners who actually matters for them to sustain or retain their power for a long time. So If this continues, nothing will be heard. No demands or no agenda from the people will be heard or fulfilled. So I think this is the struggle of the people of Bangladesh with the spirit of, real spirit of liberation war, to fight for democratization, to fight for a democratic polity, and to achieve their voting rights permanently. Thank you all for listening to me and having your patience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Saki. I think what I appreciated the most about your comments is, after an eloquent statement of the problem and the consequences of the problems going unresolved, you've actually put on the table very concrete suggestions for reform. You've put on the table solutions and a direction which you think we need to go. And of course, I mean, a lot of what you say makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad we're having this discussion a year before January 2024, because of course a lot of what you're talking about is not something that can be fixed or addressed in a day, a week, or a month. It's going to take a long time. And I do think issues such as proportional representation, a bicameral legislature, reform of statutory bodies, judiciary bodies, more separation of power, more accountability are absolutely discussions we need to have. Whether these can only be accomplished under the aegis of a neutral or interim or a caretaker administration, or whether that's actually something which elected government can also take up, is, I'm sure, a subject other speakers here on the panel and elsewhere will want to discuss. But I do think, I'm very glad that you've put it on the table, because I do think these kinds of structural, long-term, big vision reform discussions are discussions we don't have enough of here in Bangladesh. Rumeen, let me move it over to you, and let's hear your opening thoughts, comments, observations, and then afterwards, Nahim, you'll get the right of last answers. I think in that sense it's good that you are closing the batting, because you've heard what everyone else has to say, and then you can respond. It's very big. Yeah, I'm sure. And I think what we'll do, actually, initially I'd mentioned that after the first round of statements, we'd have a second round of statements. But I think people have spoken at a fair length, and I think that's fine. I really wanted to hear what everyone's had to say, so I have no problem with that. So after Rumeen and Nahim have spoken, I think we'll bring it, open it up to the audience immediately, and then if you have observations, questions, comments, you can direct them to the panel, and we can continue the discussion that way. So Rumeen, over to you now.
Thank you, Zafar. Thank you so much. Salam to everyone and very good morning. First of all, I'd like to give thanks to Dhaka Tribune and Norwegian Embassy for making me a part of this wonderful discussion. Obviously, I don't expect that all the problems will be solved by today's dialogue, but it's a good kickoff, of course. Today's title is Common Ground, How to Get a Free and Fair Election. We, the politicians, civil society, as well as the common people, talk about election every now and then. What is our main concern? Our main concern is whether we will ever be able to vote and choose our representatives freely, and if so, when and how, especially when the ruling regime clearly crushed down our electoral system. In the last few years, we experienced such election where people couldn't vote. In 2014, representatives of 153 states were selected uncontested. I purposefully use the word selected as no election took place in those states. The ruling party selected the candidates and they automatically became MPs. Not a single vote was needed for that. This so-called election contradicts clearly Article 7(1), 11, and 65(2) of our Constitution, and above all, the very spirit of the Constitution of Bangladesh. In that election, the so-called main opposition party, Jatiyo Party, was forced to play the role of the opposition. 3 ministers and special envoy to the Prime Minister were employed from the opposition party, which was unprecedented in the contemporary world. After that, some local government elections were taken place, which were also marred by rigging and violence. Another national election took place in 2018, which was, though participatory, was not free and fair. This election is popularly known as midnight election. In the survey done immediately after the election by Transparency International Bangladesh, found that in 94% of constituencies, some form of rigging happened. Most important finding of that survey was proof of ballot stuffing in the previous night was found in 66% of the constituencies. TIB told that if asked, they were ready to produce the documents on which the survey was based, but the ruling regime did not challenge the data officially. Now another election is knocking at the door, and here the discussion begins. First of all, as the main opposition party, our prime concern is whether the election will be such where the people can exercise their voting rights or it will be marred as before. Secondly, history says only 4 elections in past 51 years were more or less accepted by all the parties. Those are the general elections held in 1991, 1996, 2001, and 2008. All those elections were taken place under a non-partisan caretaker government. The concept of caretaker government is the brainchild of Awami League. They compelled BNP to amend the constitution and make the caretaker government a part of it. After assuming power in 2009, they realized that keeping the constitution as it is, they won't be able to continue their ruling. Therefore, in a verdict, the Supreme Court of Bangladesh, though declared caretaker government unconstitutional, left option for the parliament to have 2 more general elections under caretaker government. The government formed a committee to collect opinions from all stakeholders led by 2 senior Awami League leaders. In that committee, Awami League opined in favor of caretaker government. But suddenly, the decision was changed and caretaker was abolished from the constitution. Hence, the election of 2014 and 2018 were held under Awami League government. Next election is knocking at the door, as I have already said, and the government is adamant, saying that the caretaker government is a dead and buried issue. So no election can be held under caretaker government. Election will take place keeping them in power. But after 2018, it's in no way possible for the opposition to rely on such statement from the government. Bangladesh is facing acute crisis. There is no democracy, no freedom of speech, no freedom of association, no human rights, and so on. There is fear psychosis everywhere. Black laws like Digital Security Act, Anti-Terrorism Act, or Special Powers Act are being used to shut the opposition up. In a false and politically motivated case, our chairperson was in jail. She is now in house arrest and the government compelled her to stay away from the politics. Our acting chairman, he is in exile. The government arrested our general secretary prior to the Dhaka rally at 3 a.m. for no reason. Initially they said that they are taking him for interrogation under the instruction of some higher authority, but later on he was shown arrested. So as one of our standing committee members. Our party office was vandalized, doors were broken, police used tear shell and arrested our activists before the rally. In fact, anyone having different view from that of the government is now become a target. Random cases are filed against our members and activists. We call those cases ghost cases. Nothing happened, no evidence, no witness, but the case has been filed. Over 3.5 million people were accused in 200,000 cases. Our people are being killed, picked up by the police, face enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killing, torture in police custody, and whatnot. In last 4 months, police gunned down 8 BNP activists. Father of a BNP activist was brutally beaten to death. Hundreds of cases have been filed against BNP supporters and activists. Before every single rally, mass transport service was stopped. Police searched the BNP activists' house to arrest them, but nothing could stop people from joining in our rally. They reached the meeting place on foot, rickshaw van, and many other ways that's possible. These meetings become the meetings of general people, not only BNP activists and members. This certainly gives a clear message to the government that general people started relying on BNP and consider it the only way out from this authoritarian regime. A country which observed its golden jubilee of independence 1 year back is facing a real threat of being a failed state. It's an emergency situation. Discussion like improving institutional capacity within the existing constitution for free and credible election in this situation will never give a hope to reverse this dire situation. Extraordinary situation deserves extraordinary measures and extraordinary care. An acceptable and participatory election under a non-partisan caretaker government is a bare necessity in this situation. Such an election will not solve all the problems, of course I can understand that. But during it will certainly start improving the situation, pave the way to a truly democratic Bangladesh, which will ensure all the rights of the citizens. One thing needs to be kept in mind. An elected government is more likely to be accountable than an unelected one. So to ensure democracy, good governance, freedom of speech and expression, rule of law, human rights, we need to have a free and fair participatory election in 2014. It cannot be like 2024. It cannot be like the election of 2014 or 2018. Thank you so much. Thank you for your patient hearing.
Thank you, Rumeen. That was admirably brief and succinct, and I think very well stated. Nahim, over to you. I think you've heard a lot of what the other speakers have to say. I'm sure you have much to say in response. And so please, let's hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Zafar bhai, and it's a pleasure to be here. This dialogue is very much a necessity of time, and hence, but the timing is wrong, because I think after yesterday's World Cup semi-final, late nights, and then today pretty heavy discussion, I think we could have done it a little bit later, I guess. But fair enough. Good morning, salam, and everyone here today. I hope that the discussion following my deliberation would be much more thrilling and energetic. So there is a lot of discussions which has gone through, and I want to highlight a couple of issues. And before I do that, I want to pay my respect to all the intellectuals who were murdered in 1971. And yesterday we, everyone paid our respect. And tomorrow is the Victory Day, and hence it's a celebration of our Liberation One, and Bangladesh was liberated in 1971, and hence I show my respect to all the martyrs and freedom fighters. I, for one, the ones who know me, my name is Nahim Razzaq. I'm a member of Parliament. This is my 3rd term in Parliament. My father was a freedom fighter, a former policy maker. He was 6 times member of Parliament, minister, and most of all, he was an organizer of the Liberation War, Mr. Abdul Razzaq. So I take this challenge to make my deliberation very brief and very precise. So the highlight of this discussions and the key words that has come out so far is common grounds, constitution, consensus, acceptable, and overcome. I think I'll just pay my note on these 5 key words. First is common grounds. Now, of course, we all want a common ground and consensus to going towards an election or a political environment where everyone is heard and we all respect each other's grounds and arguments. That's, we all want it. And as been said by eminent speakers already, that Bangladesh Awami League has been in the forefront due to its lead in terms of the liberation war under the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. But these common grounds over the years have been tarnished. And when we talk about how it's been tarnished, I think these things need to be elaborated. I don't want to go way back and I don't want to go too much in detail, but I just want to detail a couple of things. First, 71, the freedom of Bangladesh. 73 election, I think we have left out 73 election. It's a very acceptable election that was held in 73 elections. And fair enough, and after that, the military regime. And we all, I think all parties, you know, BNP, Jatiya Party was led by General Ershad, and BNP and other parties, they collaborated toward getting consensus, bringing back democracy. And 1991 election, which we all think that it's a credible election, let's go for it. So 1991 election, it was a temporary understanding mode of election which we all accepted, and we went into elections. BNP won, Awami League was in the opposition, and then going forward, what happened? 1994, Magura by-election. What happened in Magura by-election? Just previous to Magura by-election, Dhaka City Corporation, Chittagong City Corporation election was lost by BNP. So they became just desperate. In Magura election, it was massive rigging. And that is where the common ground was lost, in my honest opinion. Then in 1996, of course, as Rumeen Farhana has already mentioned, Awami League floated the idea of caretaker form of government, and everyone had consensus, went into election, and then of course Awami League came into power in 1996. And if we say from then onwards until now, everyone forgets 2001 was the only time during that tenure, or this tenure since 1991, is peaceful power transition had happened. Awami League under the leadership of Sheikh Hasina, we lost the election, we handed over the power to BNP. This was a peaceful transition. Other than that, I haven't seen, or we do not see, or we cannot claim that there was any peaceful transition. So 2001 happened. Going forward, we came across 2006. So 12.3 million fake voters. The Chief Justice, who became CEC, his term was increased 2 years, not exhausting enough constitutional grounds, and that created controversy. And then, of course, 15th February election we all know about, which BNP did, and so forth and so forth. And again, election came up, and 2 years of unconstitutional government, military-backed government we saw, and then 2008 election. And I also want to mention that 2014 election is not unconstitutional because it was participatory in different format, and of course we can always say, and I have heard a lot of speakers say, a lot of eminent people saying that it wasn't fully participatory because BNP did not participate, but it wasn't unconstitutional. Now going forward, what do we do? As soon as I came into this hall room, I think I was sharp on time today. Somebody asked me, what do you think is going to happen? So I said, what do you mean? It's like, what are you going to do? That means Awami League or power, Awami League in power, what is Awami League going to do? I said, you need two people to tango. You need two people to tango. You cannot put everything on one's shoulder and talk about consensus. You need the other part or the other party to be able to have resolutions which are acceptable by all parties. So that is, I think, where we are lacking behind. And Rumeen, Farhana, I think I should have sat there beside her, today, because this separation is for the optics, but it clears clear division. So this for the optics, but then again it kind of creates a clear division. So what she outlined in her deliberation was a clear 10 points that they have outlined in their the going forward, their demands as such. And Saki bhai has also mentioned his 7 points, that their party has demanded and so forth. These demands are all well and good, as long as they are acceptable by the other party, which could be us as well. We are a part as well. So these things needs to be elaborated in different fashions. So that is one part that we need to understand. Consensus means acceptability by all party, does not only mean the party in power. One. Now going forward, acceptability. I very much accept the criticisms going forward and behind towards 2018 elections. We accept the criticisms, but then again, where was the criticisms and where is the reference point that was driven by BNP and then Arise in terms of creating an ecosystem or holding an election which is acceptable? Where is that notion? And when we talk about negotiation, who do we negotiate with? The people who do not have a track record of peaceful transfer of power. We do not have a track record of non-alignment. We do not have a track record of non-violence. We can talk about non-violence. Asanullah Master MP, former Finance Minister, Mr. Kibriya, 23,000 Awami League, leaders and workers were killed in tenure of 5 years. So, and the nail in the coffin in terms of consensus and common ground was absolutely went, beyond any point, was 21st August 2004 grenade attack. What do we say in that? Do BNP owe up to this atrocities that was done? I, for one, I'm also a victim when I do say my father was one of the individuals who was injured from knee downwards until his foot was all burnt. Then he had to go through surgery in India. So we are also a victim of 2004 grenade attack. So the common grounds and the trust issue is a big talking about the Ukraine war and Bangladesh's stand towards a global multilateral aspect of it. So we want all these things to be done. And with regards to Sharmeen Appa's initial deliberation, and she's been very, very clear in terms of what and what not, right? So, of course, we talk about civil society. It was Awami League who had the support of the civil society in 1971, and that is why they were killed. And it is not that we are trying to marginalize it. There are civil societies who talk in favors of a lot of grounds that has been made by Awami League. And especially we are talking about the elections. Since we are talking about the elections, this election commission bill was a demand also by BNP. We have now in 2022, we are the ones who have actually passed it in the parliament. We're open to the idea of having a thorough discussion and going back to make adjustments. That is not beyond any discussion. We can talk about discussion. We talk about Digital Security Act. We talk about Terrorism Act. Which country does not have these sort of security measures? You tell me. The Honorable Law Minister has again and again has mentioned that we are ready to talk about the adjustments that we can do in terms of Digital Security Acts, because yes, I do agree that there have been some cases where misappropriation of those Digital Security Acts was enacted, but by and large these Digital Security Act is a necessity. We have fellow friends from the media and journalistic fraternity You know. But there needs to be accountability. Where is the accountability? You do not have accountability, then we are talking about governance. Governance and accountability goes in synonyms. It is hands in hand. So accountability is also required. So Digital Security Act is required, and then we talk about Terrorism Act, which is required. So these sort of measures are taken to have a safeguard in the state. And of course, I do not support any sort of violence, state-driven violence against a political party. But when we talk about rule of law, what does the state do? The state has a right to defend or to protect its citizens and the property of the citizens. We cannot forget 2013 atrocities, violence, murder, burning. How are you going to deny those things? Who did those things? BNP and Jamaat. We cannot refute those things. The journalistic fraternity, the honorable diplomatic fraternity, we have all seen it. So we cannot take those things out of context and talk about only the next election just because there is a new rejuvenation of BNP through its file and rank. We welcome that. We want a strong opposition. Who wants to actually play in the open field without any opposition? We don't. So that's where I think we should be drawing our deliberation and our discussions. First of all, you need to go up. You need to make sure the oppositions are committed towards non-violence. That's one. You cannot allow violence. And even in Germany, a couple of days back, the right-wing parties, they were arrested. You saw the news, right? So these are there. Which state doesn't protect its people and the state itself from violence? So you must ensure that there will not be violence going forward. One. The second part is consensus. You give in some, we give in some. You don't create anarchy. Into the 10th December rally and the gathering that BNP had, every one of us, I think here, not me, but most of them, even general public was fearful of what was going to happen. My landlord came up and just said, give my rent a little bit early because after 10th we don't know what is going to happen. My landlord, all right. So that was actually the situation, the environment. So Rumeen, Farhana, myself, Saki bhai, and a lot of others. We have Tabid here, and all Ashik here. We are all into this fraternity of politics, and we must ensure that people are not fearful of what you are trying to do. They must have faith that you will not create violence. Raju bhai is here. A lot of us, we are into politics. So, point being said is that we are and we want to. The civil society must be heard, but of course, let us not overstate the scenarios that we have in Bangladesh. The Honorable Prime Minister, under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister, we have had a lot of achievements which needs to be also taken into note. And the diplomatic fraternity has always been a big partner in going forward, and we want to take this leap of faith. Awami League wants to take a leap of faith, but the other part needs to reciprocate in an equal manner. Thank you so much for giving me patience. Thank you.
There are hands up already.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Nahim. I think I would like to bring in the rest of the august audience. Why don't we start with Shamshir Mubin Chaudhry Bir Bikram, former Ambassador and Foreign Secretary. Here, you got the thing. And
thank you, Zafar.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can be identified as a former foreign secretary, former diplomat. But the only thing I am not a former is a freedom fighter. The freedom fighter is never a former. I will just start off by saying we are holding this between two very historic days. The 14th of December, which is a very, very sad and tragic day for us, the history of Bangladesh, and the 16th of December, which is a joyous occasion for us. Why I'm here with a slightly heavy heart, as I was walking in, I was reading one of the English dailies, and the Jamaat-e-Islami issued a statement denying that the intellectuals were killed by the Pakistanis. That we should have written the statement. It's in the press. I would request the panelists, especially who represent the political parties, Nahim, Farhana, Rumeen, and of course Saki, to condemn the statement of Jamaat. It's an insult to the whole war of liberation. Those who do not condemn it openly actually end up condoning that statement. I'm not here to go to ask a question. I'm just going to make some comments because these people have spoken. I'll start off with what Sharmeen had said, very emotionally, and she is typically very strong in making her points. My first point, Sharmeen, is you left out the elections of 73 and the second election of 1996. They were credible, acceptable, and it went along well with the people. So I think when you record the thing, my issue is with the 2008 election. The outcome was acceptable, not because of the government of the day, but in spite of it. Because the election commission did a good job, a relatively better job than many in the past, and that's why people accepted the outcome. And if I remember right, the BNP went to the parliament on the very first day after the 2008 election. Why are you saying in spite of the government? Because that government had, as Nahim had pointed out, violated the letter and the spirit of the constitution. They were there to be there for 90 days at the most, as the constitution said, but they overstayed their welcome by more than 21 months. That's my first comment. My second comment, Sharmeen again asked for the international community to come forward. Frankly, if we look back, the experience of the involvement of the international community, the history is not a very happy one. We had the Commonwealth in 1994-95, I think. 2014, before the 2014 election, we had the United Nations itself. And that again was not helpful because it ended up being a dialogue among the deaf. Nobody was listening to the other side. So whatever good intention the Commonwealth might have had, whatever good intentions the UN might have had, did not work out because one side was not listening. 2008 was an outcome of the involvement of the international community. And that was something not very healthy for Bangladesh. So I think we should be able to solve our problems, and it's up to the new generation of politicians. The three of them are sitting here. All of them who think differently, who know different, the history is different. Nahim comes from an excellent legacy of politicians. So his father was a famous, so does Rumeen. Her father was an outstanding politician, one of the finest of his time. Saki is a new generation politician. So I hope you will be able to come up with solution that people accept, outcome that the people of the country can accept. And let us not have another dialogue of the deaf. Let us have a serious, meaningful, constructive dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm Major General Retired Shahid. I'll start with an incident, incident happened with me. Many years back, I was ordered by the army to deploy my unit in a politically sensitive district for electioneering. And it was, at that time, it was a really hyped up election at that time, and we were really fearing for violence. So we went there. Nothing happened. Election was excellent, and as the madam was also mentioning, one of those elections where the one I'm talking about. So, 2001. I'll not name the district. Election went excellently and very well, and no violence, nothing. To our surprise, just after within 1 year, we were again sent back to that same district to recover arms. we recovered lots of arms. 90 to 95% of them are unlicensed. But which horrified us, I as a military background, having military background, I never saw those weapons. What happened? Just because there was a government who was not a political government at the center, who were neutral, and it was these same people, they could not bring out those weapons. And what is horrifying, that 2 of the weapons were found just in front of my headquarters. This is what it is. So that means the caretaker government, it works. And it is the one which is, I mean, everybody wants that. And another thing which most of us may not have seen, the celebratory atmosphere during that time, which I've seen in, I mean, most of the time I spent in North Bengal, so also South Bengal also. In the rural areas, it's actually celebratory. But unfortunately, in 2018, where I was the first time voter in the age of 55, I didn't see that celebration. So this is irony. So caretaker or political non-political government or whatever you give the name, it matters. This is, having said that, my question, I've got 3 questions. All of the 3 politicians who are here. First is Mr. Razzaq MP. I thought I'll be getting an answer from your short talk. Unfortunately, I didn't get. Awami League is the oldest party in Bangladesh. As Madam also said, you have got a checkered history. But why you are afraid of people to get their mandate with fair and fair election? Number 1. Just footnote here. Please, we know what happened in 2014. We know Sujata Singh. We know 2018. We also know midnight voting. So this is still, I'll ask, why you are afraid of people? The people you made, these are the people who made you. I mean, yourself, and Awami League is based on that one. And we had a very checkered, what is it called, legacy in Awami League. This is for you. And Madam Barrister, for you, I'm unfortunately to say, though this is a little bit correction I had to do after 10th December, the happenings of 10th December, whatever happened in Dhaka. One of my observation, I mean, we Bangladesh, I'm talking about not of a political leader, or since I'm from the military, I'm an average people. We have seen for the last 15 years, BNP has got a very serious problem. One of the problems is you don't have depth in your leadership. Depth doesn't mean that I'm talking about the, what is it called, education, then intellectual. Those are not things I'm talking about. I'm talking when one leader falls, another should come out. Another should come. Just see the Jamaat Islami. One of the leader was arrested, another came up. So this depth is missing. You are all banking on your one leader. So this is not a healthy one. And number 2, you have to also take some responsibility for whatever happened for the last 15, so last 10 years. Like most of the programs you have been giving, it's not related with the people. Chaler dam holo 60 taka, but you are not going onto the street for 60 taka chal. So this is what I'm talking about, that you are somehow the other way. Before 10th December, of course, you have lost your ways. This is for you. And Mr. Saki, for you, do you think is there any scope for ideological based politics in the world at this moment where hate mongering rules? Thank you very much. Mr. Zafar, thank you very much for allowing us to for listening to our young guns.
We'll take another few questions and comments, and then I'll give it back to the panel, and you can incorporate answers to the general's questions in your closing statements. Good.
Thank you, Zafar. My name is Iftikhar Chaudhary. I'm a fellow, honorary fellow of the Institute of South Asian Studies in Singapore. I should like to thank, I should be remiss were I not to thank you and Aspen for inviting me here. I'll focus on one point in the debate. where there isn't sufficient heat around it now, but it will come, it will happen. এবং সেটা Zonayed had raised it, তার 7 পয়েন্টের মধ্যে. First of all, of course, I'd like to commend all the speakers. Outstanding event this morning. I'm used to seminars and conferences, and this one really does take the cake. Barisal and Rajshahi. Sutarang, is it not possible to sort of create certain regions in the constitutional system? I like to believe that I'm a student of comparative government, and this is done almost everywhere in every for governance format today. Shekhan Theke, you spoke of the second house. Of course, a second house is a necessity. Ebong Shekhan Theke representatives will come to the second house. Ebong tader kortobbo hobe to urge calm on the House of Representatives, which will really be the Parliament. Now, this is a fundamental element in any existing governance system around anywhere, any system which calls itself democratic today. Sheta hotei hobe. My only assertion would be, I mean, you might think that this is too far into the future. But this is probably beyond the elections or beyond whatever changes you foresee in the immediate future. But it is no longer a debate of the future. I would like to say that it is a debate whose time has actually come. Devolution, and devolution as a fundamental element in our socio-political governance system. Thank you.
Thank you for a very, very vibrant panel. This was really wonderful. I think I'm going to step back a little bit and ask a very basic question as we think about common grounds, because what I'm hearing is, in the name of common grounds, we're talking about negotiations, about consensus building, as if, you know, these are all mutually exclusive, as if we're not all on the same page. When, in fact, I'd like to think that we are all on the same page. Do we all want democratic rights? Do you all want democracy? That is the very basic question. And if we do, if all of you, if all of us, if we all do want democratic rights, then common grounds are actually fairly easy, I would like to think. So, for example, if there are authoritarian tendencies embedded in our constitution, it is in all of our interest to fight against that. That kind of reform that is our common ground, right? So it's not that, you know, if I'm in power, I like it. If I'm not, I don't. If we do believe in democratic rights, if we believe in democracy, and that's why that's the first question. Do we want democratic rights? Do we believe in democracy? If we do, then that's really a no-brainer, right? And I think that kind of a structural explanation is very useful in terms of thinking about how to move forward again. So if you come back to Sakibai's point of you know, the problems of a majoritarian system and the preference for proportional representation and so on, you know, in that sense, we are actually doing fairly well, theoretically at least, right? The median voter theorem tells us that we should expect two ideologically similar political parties. And we do have ideologically similar political parties. The differences that we do see and we want to highlight are really about polarization, right? Choosing specific ideological points in order to create a difference and a sort of semblance of difference, right? When in fact, you know, if we sort of think about policy making and so on, there are many ways in which there's convergence, right? So, you know, sure, albeit variation. But that's also where we see tendencies towards democratic backsliding. Because if we do think that there's no difference between these two political parties, then the desire for change is also very limited. Right? You know, and we hear this often, right? So what will elections do? You know, what will it change? You know, it will be the same thing again and again. Just you know, people at the top, they will look different. There will be no meaningful change, right? And so I think that's where again this sort of a structural explanation of why we don't see change is useful, right? As we sort of think about what kind of reforms might bring us forward. And one last point about the caretaker government is that I think, again, coming back to it's linked to the first point about it to be more democracy, is this idea that if we do believe, like a few days ago, our foreign minister said that Bangladesh is a beacon of democracy. Right? If we actually do believe that, then of course we're not going to allow any kind of caretaker government to come in place, right? Because any strong democracy would say that we have the institutional capability to hold free and fair elections, right? So there has to be that recognition has been democratic backsliding, without which we won't even get to the first step of thinking about why a different kind of process for elections will be necessary. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Nahim. Arafat, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Zafar, Dhaka Tribune, and the Norwegian Embassy, of course, to, with such an interesting topic. And I was listening very attentively with all the speakers, their comments and the opinion on certain issues. So as far as the common ground goes, I just have few opinion of my own. I just want to share some of it. I think we have reached to the common ground quite a few number of times in the past. But those after arriving to the common ground, we just couldn't hold on to it, did not sustain. So therefore, arriving to the common ground is not good enough to make it sustainable, and we are not thinking about that. That is something that pains me. That we always try to look for an ad hoc solution, some temporary solution. Don't think about something long term. Like we think about next election, how to get it fair and fair. Why not all the other elections afterwards? So this is where the problem lies, And for that, what we need to do is we need to go back to the past a little bit and to try to find out what went wrong after 91 onward. After the fall of the military dictator, the consecutive military dictators that we saw, then we started off with lots of optimism and hope, right? So what went wrong? Both the parties, like even though BNP is blamed to be, evolved from the military dictatorship, but then again, we want to give it enough credit for joining hand with Awami League and, taking part in terms of getting the Ershad regime down, and they kind of developed and evolved to be another democratic political party, right? But then again, so we started off right in 91. So what happened? That was a conventional system that you had. We did not even need the caretaker government, did we? If we could continue with that. So something went wrong. Again, I want to mention that back in 94, in famous Magura election, BNP tried to steal the election. That's why we had to think about some alternative innovative system that was caretaker system. We didn't have to even worry about that at all, if we could continue properly. So anyway, we brought that innovative caretaker system, which was unheard of globally, and then is again wanted to be optimistic. Awami League came into power, handed over power peacefully at the end of their term. BNP came back in 2001. Again, this system also got destroyed. And not only it got destroyed, it got exposed to, we saw the weaknesses of the system. Then we saw the caretaker government can get extended to 2 years. All those unelected people. Now we're talking about the trust issue, right, between the political parties. It's not only about that. Who are the people going to form the caretaker government? Do we trust those people? We see, there are people picked up from the civil society. But is there any trust between the politicians and even the civil society? Who are you going to do it? After 1/11, we famously call it 1/11, right? We don't even see the trust between the politicians and the civil society. How are you going to form that? So that's why what I think is, let us think about a long-term solution, the conventional democratic process, by strengthening the institutions, and like the way we see in India, in our neighboring country, in US, in UK. Why can't you think about something like that? Why do you have to always, look for some temporary solution for it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think let's do a quick round of response from the panel, and then we'll go to another round of questions, and that'll be the last round. But Sharmeen, you want to questions, comments, responses?
Thank you. I want to touch on all of these points, but I think a couple of things that keep coming back, and we as citizens constantly see the two major political parties, AL and BNP, they're both very defensive about their position. And in defending their position, they constantly go back to the past and to things that they have, the errors that they have made. What has been said already is all very true, but I think we need to recognize one thing. Why did BNP not return to power in 2008? Why did Awami League get elected in 1996? Mind you, if you allow the people to vote freely, they will take the right decision. BNP faltered after coming to power, post-1991. BNP faltered, and BNP was dealt a blow by the people. And in 2001, when BNP came back to power and lost it in 2008, it lost it because it faltered again, to a point where they were no longer acceptable to the people. This is something which our politicians constantly lose sight of. And if today Awami League is now facing grave criticism, it is important that Awami League look inside. 21st August, heinous crime, nobody condones it. But if Awami League is going to stay stuck in 2021 and August 21 and constantly take an approach which is shall I say, well, I don't really want to use that word, but if it affects them to the point where they constantly use that as an excuse for poor governance, there's a time that argument expires. Now, I think that argument is expiring. With all the love that we have for our politicians, our leaders, it is important that they acknowledge where they are failing and where they are gaining the support of the people. And I think that the fact that Awami League won these elections has been an award by the people and a show of trust. And if today Awami League is facing a huge challenge, then they must question why this has happened. Has there been moving away from the people? So I would like you to keep that in mind. And for both the political parties, you have made your errors. And you must pay the consequences for that. And people make you do that. So it's important. Magura led to the end of BNP rule. 1996 ended BNP rule. Please acknowledge that your mistakes, the elections of 2014 was by no means acceptable, maybe constitutional. Rule of law is not always enough. Rule of principle, rule of ethics is equally important, and if not at times more. So I will leave it at this. Just a little comment on my niece, Naveen, who said, who put forth the argument, democracy and CTG, caretaker government, as opposing state of being. However, I'd just like to mention that democracy, democratic institutions in Bangladesh over the 50 years have not been built. If that were built, if we had a strong judiciary, if we had a strong election commission, if we had the rule of law as we would desire it to be, today what she says is absolutely true. But if we have a weak democracy, how do we strengthen it in a way so that people can vote? We've also learned that this weak democracy does not lead to free and fair elections. Thank you.
Thank you, Saki. If I could come to you, and specifically, Chachi, if you could address the issue which Arafat brought up, which is, the long-term reform, why is it that that reform needs to be done under the auspices of an interim or neutral or a caretaker government? Wouldn't it be a more meaningful and a more sustainable solution if we do it under the auspices of actually an elected government? I think so. Amar jodi PR kotha boli, bicameral legislature kotha boli, these are all very good reforms to discuss. But is it necessary that we have a neutral government to discuss them?
Thank you. I think I have taken more time than the allotted in my earlier speech. So I should be very brief.
Appreciate it.
What is the Awami League's proposal? There is no hope. This will continue. And it's just a dead end. I think we should turn the crisis into a situation of hope. And what Awami League is doing, I think it's the rule by law, not the rule of law. And it's a problem that they have, they've made it that, okay, power and our life security is embedded in the same position. If we are not in power, our life would be threatened. If it is the position of a political party, then the consequence, I think, we can assume what can be. আমি একটু বাংলা বলি, হ্যাঁ, প্লিজ 2 মিনিটের জন্য। আমি মনে করি যে বাংলাদেশে অবশ্যই আওয়ামী লীগ অত্যন্ত গুরুত্বপূর্ণ রাজনৈতিক দল। একদিক থেকে যে তারা কেবল জনগণের বিরাট প্রতিনিধিত্ব করে সেটাই জন্যই নয়, তারা বাংলাদেশের রাজনৈতিক ব্যবস্থার মধ্যে বিদ্যমান এখনো পর্যন্ত যে ব্যবস্থা তার মধ্যে একটা ভারসাম্যমূলক শক্তি। সুতরাং বাংলাদেশে একটা গুণগত রাজনৈতিক পরিবর্তন কিন্তু কোনোভাবেই আওয়ামী লীগকে ছাড়া কেউ ভাবছে তা কিন্তু নয়। বিষয়টা হচ্ছে যে আওয়ামী লীগ কোনো কথা শুনতে চাইছে না। আওয়ামী লীগ বলছে এইটাই বাংলাদেশের ভবিতব্য। ইনফ্যাক্ট বাংলায় বললে এটা কিন্তু জমিদারিতে রূপান্তরিত হয়েছে। এটাকে হয়তো পলিটিক্যাল রেটর মানে গালাগালি মনে হতে পারে, মাঠের বক্তব্য মনে হতে পারে, কিন্তু বাস্তবতা কিন্তু এই যে আমরা যদি প্রত্যেকটি ক্ষেত্রে খালি বলি যে এই ঘটনা ঘটেছে সুতরাং আর কোনো রিকনসিলিয়েশন সম্ভব না, আমি মনে করি যে এটা ডেড এন্ড ঘোষণা করা। ডেড এন্ডের পার্টি তো আসলে কোনো কিছু ডেলিভার করতে পারে না। বরং বাংলাদেশের একটা সংকটটা এই জায়গায় এসছে যে আমরা খুব ভেতর থেকে উপলব্ধি করা হচ্ছে, এটা পরিষ্কার হয়ে গেছে যে বাংলাদেশে এখন এই শাসন ব্যবস্থার অধীনে আর কোনো সুষ্ঠু নির্বাচন হবে না, এবং এই ট্রাস্টটা আপনি আর তৈরি করতে পারছেন না। বিকজ 2018 কিন্তু আরেকটা ঘটনা যে এই ট্রাস্টটাকে আর এখন আপনি যদি প্রধানমন্ত্রী যদি এখন আবার ডাকেন ওই ট্রাস্টের জায়গা হবে না যে প্রধানমন্ত্রী ডাকলেই সবাই ইলেকশনে আর যাচ্ছেন। কাজে এই ট্রাস্ট ফেরানোর ব্যাপারটা একটা রিফর্ম প্রোগ্রামের মধ্যে যেতে হবে। ওকে, অপোজিশন রেডি হচ্ছে, আমরা আমাদের মতো করে 7 দফা তুলেছি, রাষ্ট্রের কাঠামোর ক্ষমতা কাঠামোর গুণগত পরিবর্তন এবং একটা নির্বাচনকালীন নিরপেক্ষ সরকারের জন্য। কিন্তু এই রিফর্ম প্রোগ্রাম আমরা কিন্তু বিএনপির সাথে আমাদের যেমন যুগপৎ আন্দোলনের যখন আলোচনা হচ্ছে বিএনপির সাথে আলোচনা হচ্ছে, এবং বিএনপিও কিন্তু এই অবস্থায় উপলব্ধি করছে যে জনগণকে ঐক্যবদ্ধ করে যথেষ্ট পরিমাণ চাপ আওয়ামী লীগের উপর তৈরি করতে হলে তার হাত সামনে নতুন স্বপ্ন নতুন হোপ তৈরি করতে হবে, এবং সেও কিন্তু রিফর্ম প্রোগ্রাম ছাড়া বিএনপির সামনে কোনো উপায় নেই জনগণকে ঐক্যবদ্ধ করার। কেবল বিএনপি পাওয়ারে যাবে এর জন্য সমস্ত জাতি আরেকবার একটা রক্তক্ষয়ী সংগ্রামের জন্য প্রস্তুত হবে সেটা নয়। কিন্তু আওয়ামী লীগ এটাতে কিভাবে রেসপন্স করবে সেটা হচ্ছে মুখ্য প্রশ্ন। এক, আওয়ামী লীগ ডিগনিফাইড লেগেসি তৈরির জন্য আবারও পদত্যাগের সিদ্ধান্ত নিয়ে কিভাবে একটা রাজনৈতিক ঐক্যমত্যের ইন্টারিম গভর্নমেন্ট উইথ পলিটিক্যাল কনসেনসাস। আওয়ামী লীগকে বাদ দিয়ে তারা এটা হচ্ছে না, কিন্তু তাকে তো প্রথম সিদ্ধান্ত নিতে হবে যে দে উইল রিজাইন and they will set
যেটা বিএনপি একভাবে সিদ্ধান্ত নিয়েছিল। হ্যাঁ, তারা বলছেন যে আন্দোলনের চাপ ছিল, আন্দোলনের চাপ তো এখনো থাকতে হবে। আওয়ামী লীগকে এই জিনিসে আন্দোলনের চাপ ছাড়া আসবে, কিন্তু সেটা তো তারপরে আওয়ামী লীগকে এই জায়গায় আসার একটা জায়গায় সিদ্ধান্তে আসতে হবে। যদি তারা না আসে তাহলে কনসিকুয়েন্স আরেকটা, মানুষকে আপনি পুশ করছেন একটা অভ্যুত্থানের দিকে যেতে, আর তো কোনো উপায় নেই বাংলাদেশে। জনগণকে আপনি বাধ্য করছেন যে এইখানে তার বাঁচার জন্য তাকে অভ্যুত্থানের দিকে যেতে হবে, বিকজ আপনি এর পরিণতি এই যে যেমন আওয়ামী লীগ 2018 নির্বাচনের পরে বলেছিল যে আমরা সব ঠিকঠাক করব, এখন বলছে 2023-এর পর ঠিকঠাক করব, এরপর বলবে 2028-এর পরে ঠিকঠাক করব। কারণ ঠিকঠাক হবে না, এটা একটা কেন্দ্রীয় সেন্ট্রাল টেন্ডেন্সি আছে, এইটা সবসময় কেবল আরো কেন্দ্রীকৃত করবে ক্ষমতাকে, এবং ক্ষমতাকে এমনভাবে কেন্দ্রীকৃত করবে, ক্ষমতার চারপাশে এমন ক্রনিজদের আধিপত্য তৈরি হবে যারা এই ক্ষমতা ব্যবহার করে টাকা বানিয়েছে, এখন টাকা রক্ষার জন্য এই ক্ষমতাটাকে এইভাবেই তারা রাখতে চাইবে। এটা কতিপয় ব্যক্তির শুভ ইচ্ছার দ্বারা নির্ধারিত হবে না, সুতরাং এটা শুভ ইচ্ছার ব্যাপার নয়। এইটা সেটেলমেন্ট রিকনসিলিয়েশনের ভিত্তি হচ্ছে একটা রিফর্ম প্রোগ্রাম। রিফর্ম প্রোগ্রামের মধ্য দিয়ে যদি ব্যালেন্স অফ পাওয়ার থাকে, ওইটাই গ্যারান্টি দিবে যে হ্যাঁ, আমি যদি আক্রান্ত হই তাহলে আমি জাস্টিস পাবো। এর বাইরে আর কোনো সলিউশন নাই। পলিটিক্যাল কনফ্লিক্ট নাই পৃথিবীতে, এমন কোনো দেশ নাই। মার্কিন যুক্তরাষ্ট্র আমরা পলিটিক্যাল কনফ্লিক্ট দেখলাম, ডোনাল্ড ট্রাম্পের নেতৃত্বে কিংবা তার সমর্থকরা ক্যাপিটাল হিল মানে কি বলে হামলা করছেন, কিন্তু তাদের একটা পলিটিক্যাল সিস্টেম আছে যেটা এগুলোকে একটা মীমাংসার জায়গায় আনতে পারে। আমরা সেই সিস্টেম যদি ডেভেলপ না করি তাহলে আমরা কিভাবে এখান থেকে বের হব, পরবর্তী প্রজন্ম কিভাবে বের হবে? জেনারেশন বাই জেনারেশন হেট্রেড এবং একটা ইরিকনসাইলেবল সিচুয়েশনের মধ্যে থাকবে, এইটা আসলে সম্ভব না। ফলে আমার মনে হয় যে আমাদের রুল অফ লতে যাওয়া দরকার, এবং রুল কি জিনিস, কোনটা রুল এবং কিভাবে লয়ের রুল হবে সেই জায়গা থেকে আমাদের ভাবা দরকার। আমরা আবারও এই জায়গা থেকে বলবো যে মোহাম্মদ আরাফাত যে কথাগুলো বলেছেন তার সাথে আমরা বহু টকশো করেছি, এখানে আর টকশো করার দরকার নাই, কিন্তু আমরা বাংলাদেশের ভবিষ্যৎ যদি একটা ডেড এন্ড দেখাই তাহলে আমি মনে করি বাংলাদেশের জনগণ এটা গ্রহণ করবে না। আর ইডিওলজিক্যাল পলিটিক্স মানে ইডিওলজি এবং রুলস অফ দি গেম এক জিনিস না, কিন্তু একটা দেশের বিভিন্ন ধরনের ইডিওলজি থাকবে। আপনি যদি মনে করেন আপনার ভার্সন অফ স্পিরিট অফ মানে কি বলে লিবারেশন ওয়ার একমাত্র ভার্সন, তাহলে এটা হবে না। ইভেন সেকুলারিজম সেটা কি যেন একমাত্র, আমি যেভাবে এটা মনে করি সেটা প্রত্যেকটি মানুষকে এটাকে একইভাবে মনে করতে হবে, তাও কিন্তু হবে না। কিন্তু আমি যেভাবেই যে কোনো আদর্শকে বিবেচনা করি না কেন এবং দল গঠন করি না কেন, আমার একটা রুলস অফ দি গেম মানতে হবে। সেই রুলস অফ দি গেম মানে হচ্ছে আমার ক্ষমতার ভারসাম্য এবং জবাবদিহিতা। আধুনিক গণতন্ত্র এর চাইতে বেশি অগ্রসর হতে পারে নাই। তো পৃথিবীতে আমরা যদি এতটুকু পৌঁছাতে পারি তাহলে আমরা আমাদের দেশের মধ্যে আমরা বিপজ্জনক মানে একটা পরিণতি থেকে রক্ষা পেতে পারবো। বাংলাদেশ যদি এইভাবে একটা ডিসফাংশনাল দিকে অগ্রসর হয়, ইট উইল ক্রিয়েট এ জিওপলিটিক্যাল সিচুয়েশন। It's not only the matter of Bangladesh, it's an international matter as well. So আমি যেটা এইটুকু বলতে পারি, আমাদের দেশের মানে এই ক্ষমতার ভারসাম্যের প্রশ্নটি যেটা নাইম বললেন, নাইম রাজ্জাক যে কথাগুলো বলতে চাইলেন যে আমরা 7 পয়েন্টস তুলেছি, আমরা বলছি না যে আমাদের 7 পয়েন্টস তুলেছি এটা কোনো একান্ত মানে এটা একান্ত আমাদেরই কেবল বিষয়। আমরা ক্ষমতার ভারসাম্যের জন্য যেটা রুলস অফ দি গেম সে বিষয়ে আমাদের প্রস্তাব তুলেছে। আওয়ামী লীগের ক্ষেত্রে ভিন্ন কিছু বক্তব্য থাকতে পারে, সেটা সে কোনো বিষয়ে একমত হতে পারে, কোনো বিষয়ে অন্য প্রস্তাব নিয়ে আসতে পারে, কিন্তু পলিটিক্যাল স্টেক হোল্ডারদের মধ্যে অবশ্যই আলোচনা হতে হবে এবং পলিটিক্যাল স্টেক হোল্ডারদের একটা কনক্লুশনে পৌঁছাতেই হবে। না পৌঁছালে কিন্তু একটা সিভিল ওয়ার সিচুয়েশন ছাড়া আমি কিছু দেখতে পাচ্ছি না। আপনারা যদি দেখতে পান ভালো। ধন্যবাদ।
I think at that point I better put the mic over to Nahim. I think you better sort of respond, because I think Saki said a lot, which you would have plenty to say in response to.
I think what we are perceiving and the narratives that we are drawing, I don't agree with a lot of those narratives, and this is democracy, right? And Saki Bhai's last word was civil war. So with that dissent, I want to start, right? The meaning of civil war is a very different note, and when you draw these sort of definitions, you do not actually have a situation of common grounds. We don't. So let us not use words such as civil war a conflict and so forth and so forth. Let us try to have this situation where we can try to coexist. We are not going to have consensus or agreement on all points, but common grounds. When we are talking about common grounds, we also need to talk about alignments. We need to talk about track records. These are very valid points. Sharmeen did mention what has been done, what has not been done, who has come to power and who hasn't come to power. Let us not forget what others have done. So let us also reiterate those avenues and those situations where trust has become an issue. And when I talk about narratives, I think a lot of people have got stuck with some words such as caretaker form of government. It's just an obsolete form of government which does not exist anywhere in the world because there is a trust issue. I acknowledge that. But, and a system which has been tarnished, why should we go back towards that system? Rather, let us talk about what Sharmeen has mentioned, and I think we will all agree that institutional strengthening is where we should be focusing on. Accountability is where we should be focusing on. And that is why, under the leadership of Sheikh Hasina, in the parliament, we have passed this Election Commission Act, which did not exist. Why do we not talk about those things? Why do we have to talk about those obsolete things? And Sharmeen has mentioned about us being defensive or political parties being defensive. I'm not talking about being defensive, but rather logic. Also, you can talk about principles, but when we talk about principles, of course, I may have a different narrative of different principles. So there we go in terms of having those discussions, and these discussions are only fruitful when we can create a common ground, an environment where we can have one step of the time. You cannot have consensus on all. One step of the time. And a lot of people have been pretty kind of nice with I'm trying to be nice about how to portray Awami League. We're not the evil ones. Let's put it right. I'm trying to be nice. I'm just saying, because I don't think there is the discussions that is happening is that Awami League hasn't done anything for this country. Awami League is a victim. You know, when you talk about 2021, we cannot take that out of context. Really, 2004, 21st August, we cannot take it out of context. It has not happened in the history of Bangladesh after 1975. Why do you just shove it under the mat? You cannot. Has the party in power then? Has the party in power then? And more so, if you talk about logic and you talk about agreements, who is the leader of the party right now BNP is leading? Tariq Zia. I think a couple of days back, if I'm right, you can correct me, that in Al Jazeera, I think you were talking that Tariq Zia is, we're not allowing him to come back. We want him back. We want him back. He's hiding in London. We want him back. So let's not go into that narrative, you know. He doesn't want to come back, you know. So let's go into the facts and figures on it. You talk about human rights violations. Talk about the human rights violation in 2001 to 2006. Why don't we talk about those things? Now, of course, we can all be defensive. We can talk about these things and so on and so on forth. We can always go to the blame game scenario. But I think some needs to go up, some needs to accept, some needs to move forward. But the ecosystem needs to be there, because I'm trying to negotiate with a party whose leadership was the founding idea was created in Hawa Bhavan, which is very much documented. Let's put it, let's not disagree with it. Very much documented. But Sheikh Hasina wants to actually sit down with you. So let's be positive on some of those things. Let's not be all negative about those things. And a lot of things which are happening, of course, we do not accept, you know. So it's not that we're trying to, what you say on a mass rally, we say on a mass rally, that is political, you know, speeches. You're trying to gear up your political workers. We are trying to gear up our political workers. We want to be on the field. You are trying to be in the field. And honorable gentleman, he said, why do you fear people? Who is fearing people? People to vote. I think if I say as a lawmaker, a lot of people do actually disagree. Okay, you are unconstitutional, you haven't been voted, blah blah blah, and so forth and so forth. In the last 11 years, I have been in Parliament. This is my 2.5 or third term, and so to speak. We are the ones on the field. Where was BNP and other party in terms of COVID, in terms of crises? I haven't seen anyone, and the party that the oppositions are claiming that they want a participatory election. The last election, the candidate against me was Hawa Bhavan's Nuruddin Opu, who is one of the conspirators of 21st August grenade attack. So I'm just saying, you need to give the people, you know, the notion that yes, we are progressive, we want to, you need to actually also owe up to a lot of things that you have done. And that's where I think the law, the rule of law you're talking about, principles you're talking about, the narratives that you're talking about, these things are in question. And finally, I just want to, because we can talk about a lot of these things. Finally, the things is, you're talking about the core principles of Bangladesh. We all know about the 4 pillars, right? And on this day, need to highlight the situation that BNP still has not been able to distance themselves from Jamaat. Come on, you cannot, in this day and age, you know, you can talk about, okay, we want to do it for the sake of votes. But you do not condemn them. You have not condemned them ever, let's put it. So these things are questions in principle, with different principles on those grounds, in the principles of the founding 4 pillars of Bangladesh, and that's where I think, you know, we need to make amends and create an ecosystem where we can all talk. And then going forward, I think more so, Saki bhai is talking about the 4 points. I'm not talking 7 points that he's mentioned, or Rumeen Appa has mentioned about 10 points in her deliberation, and she will deliver after me as well. I think, you know, some of these points, it's not that we don't agree. But when you say, well, we want the government to resign tomorrow, I think if I'm incorrect, I think the senior members of the audience, I'm not sure they can, whether they can actually vet what I will be saying. I think in 1982, Rumeen Appa's father was a very eminent language movement leader and student leader. Senior, I think he was senior to my father, I think, as well, and so to speak. I think he said in Bangla, "Fana diye kintu poton hoy na." I think I still remember that. Fana diye fana hoye সরকারের পতন হয় না, এটা উনিও বলেছিলেন এক সময়. Why I'm saying it is that এইসব কথাগুলো আসে, but you know, in due respect, আজকে এরকম আন্দোলন করে তো মানুষকে, sorry, I'm going into Bengali, you know, listen. আন্দোলন করেন, I think this is good. You know, we want people to actually have their voices being said. We have more crises that needs to be handled in consensus. And I think you coming on board, 2018 election, all fairness, for the sake of the logic, let's put it, you know, the criticisms are there, and we will accept, and I do accept in a lot of things, not in my constituency, but maybe others. There are anomalies that has happened in elections. Okay, so I guess what we're trying to say is, going forward, come up with better solutions, not an obsolete form of government or the way an election should be run. Let's not go into backward, let's go forward. I think that's where I would want to finish my deliberation. Thank you.
Bring in Rumeen. I just have one quick sort of question and sort of clarification for you. I think when we talk about August 21, 2004, I don't think we should minimize the enormity and the atrocity of what happened. So my question is, keeping that in mind, and we all know what was behind it, can there actually be common ground? I mean, I think it's a legitimate question. If you have a political party, and this has been raised by the PM, it's been raised by many people who are acting in this way, is there common ground to be had? Is that common ground which the Awami League is willing to cede to them, given all of the things you have mentioned? And we can talk about August 21, 2004. It's a long list of issues.
Let's start somewhere.
Yeah, so is that's a yes?
No, of course. I think we need to suggest where it can. Saki bhai was talking about, a lot of people was talking about what was Awami League's proposal. We haven't actually proposed as of yet. We will. So, but the proposal comes in when we have a discussion, when we sit down. We haven't had it. You have spoken about a lot of things on medias, and constantly you're talking about it. We are talking about another thing. But then again, if there is no contract, there is no agreement. These are principles. No contract, no agreements, right? So let's sit down. Let's create a conducive situation where we can actually sit down. And there we will talk about what we are in alignment, or what we can talk about, and what we are accepting, or what we are not. In principles, of course, when you're saying no, caretaker form of government needs to be established, we are saying no, election commission needs to be strengthened. In that notion, you are not leaving anything for us to actually negotiate with. You're talking that we are not trying to negotiate. You are not giving us any space as well. So again, the first thing that I said, you need two people to tango. You are not giving us any leverage to talk, because you have put your stand very clear. Caretaker form of government or no election, we will not go into election, we will not go into negotiation. If that is the approach that you have taken, where does that leave us? Just because we are in power. Let's try to understand that.
Now, and I think, Rumeen, over to you, and I think that's a fair point which Nahim raises. If you're going to draw a line in the sand and say that the caretaker government is non-negotiable, and if the Awami League says, well, the caretaker government is off the table, that doesn't leave a great deal of common ground area to discuss. So that's one issue. Is there any position, for instance, what could the Awami League do short of reinstituting the caretaker government, which would be acceptable to the BNP, and incline them, incentivize them to say, okay, this is something we can work with, we can do business with. Similarly, you've heard Nahim and other speakers here talk about a lot of their concerns vis-a-vis violence, and in terms of what's happened in the past, and what assurances and what steps can the BNP take to give these assurances, not just to the Awami League, but you could say to the voting public, that were the BNP to come to power, that these would not be repeated. And I think if these issues were addressed, if concrete assurances could be put on the table, maybe then that would actually create some kind of platform, some kind of a ground to have these discussions. Because I do think these are legitimate concerns which are being raised. So I hope you can address those.
অনেকগুলো প্রশ্ন চলে এসেছে আমার জন্য।
প্রশ্নগুলোতে যাবার আগে I want to share a personal experience. It's our family experience actually. My father was a candidate in 1973 election. He was an independent candidate. He was declared elected unofficially on the day of election, but next day the result has been changed and officially he was declared not elected. আমাদের রাজনীতিতে এই যে শুরু হলো ইলেকশনের ম্যানিপুলেশন, ইলেকশনের কারচুপি, ইলেকশন রিগিং, ব্যালট বক্স স্টাফিং, that has started long back in 1973. এটা আমাদের পরিষ্কার মনে রাখতে হবে। আমরা ভুলে যাই, আমরা সবকিছু 90 এর পর থেকে শুরু করি। No, it has started from the very beginning. যেই জান্তা সরকার 1970 সালে একটা সুষ্ঠু নির্বাচন দেবার সাহস রেখেছিল এবং যার ফলে আওয়ামী লীগ ল্যান্ডস্লাইড ভিক্টরি পেয়েছিল, সেই সাহসটা 1973-তে আওয়ামী লীগ দেখাতে পারে নাই। তারা ইলেকশন রিগ করেছে এবং তারই ধারাবাহিকতা আমরা দেখেছি। আওয়ামী লীগ ক্ষমতায় থেকে যখন ইলেকশন করেছে 2014-তে এবং 2018-তে। 2014 এবং 18-র আগে আরও ইলেকশনের কথা বলা হয়, ফর এক্সাম্পল 15th February election done by BNP. That election was an election of necessity. BNP 2/3 majority ছিল না in the parliament. So তাদের কনস্টিটিউশন চেঞ্জ করবার জন্য একটা ইলেকশন দরকার ছিল এবং সেই ইলেকশনটা হয়েছে 15 তারিখে। বিএনপি প্রমিস করেছিল যে তারা আর ক্ষমতা দীর্ঘায়িত করবে না, তারা পাওয়ার হ্যান্ডওভার করবে একটা কেয়ারটেকার নন পার্টিজান সরকারের কাছে, অ্যান্ড দে ডিড সো। এবং যে মাগুরা ইলেকশনের কথা বলা হয়, যে মাগুরা ইলেকশনের কথা বলে 94 থেকে 96 আওয়ামী লীগ আন্দোলন করেছে, এখন আপনারা একটু বলেন তো প্রত্যেকটা সিটি কি মাগুরা হচ্ছে না? 300টাই আসনে কি মাগুরা হয়ে যায়নি? তো তাহলে আজকে একটা মাগুরা যদি কনস্টিটিউশন অ্যামেন্ড করার জন্য যথেষ্ট হয়, তাহলে 300টা মাগুরা কতবার কনস্টিটিউশনকে অ্যামেন্ড করবার জন্য যথেষ্ট হবে আমাকে বলেন। এই যে আওয়ামী লীগ বলছে ইটস এ dead and buried issue. We don't want to talk about it. It's no longer in the constitution. For God's sake, constitution is not Quran or Bible. It's not a holy book. It can be changed. It has already been changed for 16 times and it can be changed for 17 times as well. My friend Nahim was telling that they want Tariq Zia back. Yes, you want Tariq Zia back so that you can punish him in whichever way you want, in a false, fabricated, politically motivated case. The way you punished his mother, or 3 times Prime Minister Begum Khaleda Zia, the chairperson of PNP. একজন সম্মানিত অতিথি আমাকে প্রশ্ন করেছেন যে আমাদের লাইন অফ লিডারশিপের ব্যাপারে। আমি ওনাকে খুবই বিনীতভাবে বলতে চাই যে আমাদের লিডারশিপের কোথাও কোনো সমস্যা আমরা কর্মীরা অনুভব করছি না এই কারণেই যে as you know that our chairperson is practically his house arrest. Our acting chairman is in exile. Our Secretary General is now in jail. But still, you notice that how we performed our rally on 10th December. And it was a very, very successful program. আমরা আমাদের জেলাগুলোতে যেই সভা করেছি, আমরা আমাদের বিভাগে যেই সভাগুলো করেছি, সেই সভাগুলো কিন্তু সবই পিপল ওরিয়েন্টেড ছিল, পিপলস কজে ছিল। আমরা দ্রব্যমূল্য ঊর্ধ্বগতি, আমরা গুম, বিচার বহির্ভূত হত্যা, হেফাজতে নির্যাতন, বাংলাদেশের মানুষের ভোটের অধিকার ফিরিয়ে আনা, এগুলোই ছিল আমাদের টাইটেল এবং এই কারণগুলোর জন্যই কিন্তু আমরা আমাদের এই সংগ্রাম করে যাচ্ছি গত 15 বছর ধরে। হ্যাঁ, এর মধ্যে ডেফিনেটলি আমাদের চেয়ারপারসনকে যখন অ্যাকিউজ করা হলো, আমাদের চেয়ারপারসনকে যখন জেলে নেওয়া হলো, তখন আমরা সেই ব্যাপারে কথা বলেছি, কিন্তু সেটাও কিন্তু mass people's interested বাইরের কোনো কথা না, because Begum Zia is not just any other person. She is the chairperson of the largest party, BNP. She was Prime Minister and she is the main opposition leader. আমরা যতই জাতীয় পার্টির কথা বলি না কেন বা যতই আমরা জাতীয় পার্টিকে সংসদে প্রধান বিরোধী দল দেখানোর চেষ্টা করি না কেন, জাতীয় পার্টি নিজেও কিন্তু নিজেকে বিরোধী দল মনে করে না। তো সেই জায়গা থেকে আপনারা যদি চিন্তা করেন, বেগম খালেদা জিয়ার ইস্যুটা শুধু ওনার ব্যক্তিগত ইস্যু ছিল না, বেগম খালেদা জিয়ার ইস্যুটা পুরো দেশের মানুষের কনসার্ন ছিল। সুতরাং হ্যাঁ, সেই ব্যাপারে বিএনপি কথা বলেছে, সেই ব্যাপারে বিএনপি মিটিংয়ে কথা বলেছে এবং এই দাবি আমাদের থাকবে। নট অনলি বেগম জিয়া, আমরা চাচ্ছি সমস্ত পলিটিক্যালি মোটিভেটেড যে মামলাগুলো আছে, আমার বিরুদ্ধে আছে, আমার সহকর্মীদের বিরুদ্ধে আছে, সেই পলিটিক্যালি মোটিভেটেড মামলাগুলোকে সরিয়ে দেওয়া হোক, একটা গ্রাউন্ড তৈরি করা হোক, সো দ্যাট every party can participate in that election. আমাদের আজকের আলোচনায় আমরা কমন গ্রাউন্ড নিয়ে কথা বলতে বসেছি, কিন্তু আমরা দেখছি যে দুই দলই খুবই অনড় অবস্থান। এক দল, যেটা জাফর ভাই বলছিলেন, যে এক দল বলছে কেয়ারটেকার গভর্নমেন্ট ছাড়া there is no other alternative, আরেক দল বলছে no, it's a dead and buried issue, we can't talk about it, let's strengthen the institutions. Institution strengthening এর কথা যদি বলতে হয়, আমি আপনাদের রিসেন্ট একটা খবরের দিকে একটু নজর দিতে বলছি। আমাদের জিএম কাদের সাহেবকে আদালত থেকে নিষেধাজ্ঞা দেওয়া হয়েছে উনি ওনার দলের ব্যাপারে কোনো সিদ্ধান্ত নিতে পারবেন না। লোয়ার কোর্ট এই ডিসিশন দিয়েছে। উনি যখন অ্যাপিল করলেন হাইকোর্ট লোয়ার কোর্টের অর্ডারটাকে স্টে করে দিল, অর্থাৎ উনি ওনার দলের ব্যাপারে সিদ্ধান্ত নিতে পারবেন। অ্যাপিলেট ডিভিশনে গেল, চেম্বার জাজ আবার হাইকোর্টের অর্ডারটাকে স্টে করলো, মানে আবার উনি পারবেন না ওনার দলের ব্যাপারে সিদ্ধান্ত নিতে। এই যে একটা দল কিভাবে চলবে, দলের নেতা কিভাবে চলবে, একটা দল কার সিদ্ধান্তে চলবে, who will make the decision when court decides that says all. এটা কোর্টের বিষয় হতে পারে না। একটা রাজনৈতিক দল কার সিদ্ধান্তে চলবে এটা যখন কোর্টের সিদ্ধান্ত হয় তখন বোঝা যায় যে আমাদের ইনস্টিটিউটগুলোর কি অবস্থা। আমরা যদি দুদকের দিকে তাকাই, আমরা যদি অ্যাটর্নি জেনারেলের অফিসের দিকে তাকাই, আমরা যদি অডিটর অ্যান্ড কন্ট্রোলার জেনারেলের অফিসের দিকে তাকাই, আমরা যদি পিএসসির দিকে তাকাই, আমরা দেখব প্রত্যেকটা জায়গাকে এমনভাবে দলীয়করণ করা হয়েছে যে সেটার পুরো একটা খোল নলচা পাল্টে একটা নতুন করে তৈরি করার প্রশ্ন এসছে। এখন একেবারে সবকিছুকে ভেঙে চুরে নতুন করে গড়বার প্রশ্ন এসছে। এখন কথাটা হচ্ছে যে আমরা কমন গ্রাউন্ডে দাঁড়িয়ে এটুকুই বলতে পারি যে আমরা কি সত্যি চাই যে 2024 একটা ফ্রি ফেয়ার পার্টিসিপেটরি ইলেকশন হোক? আমরা কি সত্যি চাই যে মানুষ তার ভোট দিতে পারুক? আমরা কি সত্যি চাই এদেশের মানুষ ফ্রিডম অফ এক্সপ্রেশন পাক? আমরা কি সত্যি চাই এদেশের মানুষ ফ্রিলি রাজনীতি করতে পারুক, ফ্রিডম অফ অ্যাসোসিয়েশন থাকুক, আমাদের দেশের মানুষের মানবাধিকার থাকুক? এই জায়গাগুলোতে যদি আমরা কমন পেজে থাকি তাহলে একরকম, আর যদি না হয় তাহলে আসলে কমন গ্রাউন্ডে আসা সম্ভব না। থ্যাংক ইউ।
Thank you, Rumeen. We're almost out of time, but I know that there are one or two people who would like to speak, so we'll just have two very quick comments and then I'll close it up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zafar, for giving me the floor, and heartiest congratulations to Dhaka Tribune and the Norwegian Embassy for holding such a grand discussion and dialogue. Certainly holding free and fair elections is of utmost importance, but I believe that holding free and fair elections alone will not entirely change the situation or turn things around. আমি একটু বাংলায় ব্রিফ করি। বাংলাদেশের কনটেক্সটে আমাকে একটু যেতে হচ্ছে, আমি একটু সময় দিচ্ছি 2-3 মিনিট। 1954 পোস্ট কলোনিয়াল সময় elections were held in Bangladesh, I mean in East Bengal বা পূর্ব বাংলায়। যুক্ত ফ্রন্টের নেতৃত্বে আমাদের তখনকার সময়ের great leaders like শেরে বাংলা ফজলুল হক, হোসেন শহীদ সোহরাওয়ার্দী and Maulana Bhashani, and of course বঙ্গবন্ধু শেখ মুজিবুর রহমান being the youngest leader then, তারা ইলেকশনে অংশগ্রহণ করে এবং এর একটা টার্নিং পয়েন্ট ছিল ইতিহাসে পাকিস্তানি শাসক গোষ্ঠীর বিরুদ্ধে। স্পেশালি মুসলিম লীগ যখন ফ্র্যাঙ্কেনস্টাইন হয়ে গেল, যে মুসলিম লীগ পাকিস্তান রাষ্ট্র সৃষ্টি করলো, সেই মুসলিম লীগের এগেইনস্টে যারা মুসলিম লীগের সভাপতি ছিলেন একে ফজলুল হক অ্যান্ড হোসেন শহীদ সোহরাওয়ার্দী এন্ড মৌলানা ভাসানী, তারা একজোট হলেন একটা জাতির ক্রান্তি লগ্নে, এবং ইট ওয়াজ এ টার্নিং পয়েন্ট ইন দ্য হিস্ট্রি অফ বেঙ্গল পলিটিক্স। তো তারা মুসলিম লীগকে একদম বিন করে দিলেন, অর্থাৎ ট্র্যাশ করে দিলেন ফর এভার ফ্রম দ্য সয়েল অফ বেঙ্গল। এরপরে দেখা গেল যে ফেয়ার ইলেকশনে মানুষ ভোট দিল এই তিন নেতাকে এবং যুক্ত ফ্রন্টকে, কিন্তু সেটাকে আনফেয়ারনেসের মাধ্যমে সরিয়ে দেওয়া হলো। পাকিস্তানি শাসক গোষ্ঠী যুক্ত ফ্রন্টকে নিষিদ্ধ ঘোষণা করলেন এবং সে সরকারকে উৎখাত করলেন। তাহলে দেখা যাচ্ছে সেই সরকার সবচেয়ে বড় লিডিং রোলে ছিল আওয়ামী লীগ। তো আওয়ামী লীগ কিন্তু ফেয়ার ইলেকশনের সবচেয়ে আনফেয়ারনেসে পড়েছে বারবার। 70-তে দেখেন 1970-তে কি হলো, ফেয়ার ইলেকশন হলো, বঙ্গবন্ধুকে ভোট দিল, আওয়ামী লীগকে ভোট দিল জনগণ, কিন্তু পাকিস্তান শাসক গোষ্ঠী মেনে নিল না। অ্যাজ এ রেজাল্ট দেশ স্বাধীন হয়ে গেল পরবর্তী সংগ্রামের মাধ্যমে বঙ্গবন্ধুর নেতৃত্বে। বাট সেখানে কিন্তু ফেয়ার ইলেকশন ছিল, ফেয়ার ইলেকশন ওয়াজ হেল্ড, বাট আনফেয়ার মিনস ওয়ার প্র্যাকটিসড তখন আওয়ামী লীগের এগেইনস্টে। আবার 73-তে একটা ফেয়ার ইলেকশনের মাধ্যমে আওয়ামী লীগ রাষ্ট্র ক্ষমতায় ছিল। স্টিল 75-এ যে ঘটনাটা ঘটলো, হত্যাযজ্ঞ ঘটলো, তো ফেয়ার ইলেকশনে থাকা গভর্নমেন্টের এগেইনস্টে আনফেয়ারনেস প্লে করা হলো অ্যান্ড সরকারকে উৎখাত করা হলো, এবং তারপরে সেটার কোনো কম্পেনসেশন হলো না। এবং 21 বছর আওয়ামী লীগ সংগ্রাম করেছে, রাস্তায় রাস্তায় সংগ্রাম করেছে, আন্দোলন করেছে, এবং 21 বছর পর রাষ্ট্র ক্ষমতায় এসেছে সংগ্রামের মাধ্যমে। বাট দেন এগেইন আওয়ামী লীগ sustained wound and injuries, but they were never ever compensated for what it had sustained তো এই জিনিসগুলো কিন্তু রিকনসিলিয়েশনের ব্যাপার আছে। These are to be addressed and taken into consideration before we leap forward for any reconciliation program. আজকে যদি এগুলাকে unsettled রেখে, unaddressed রেখে, if we talk about holding free and fair elections only, things will not actually be addressed in its true sense and spirit. এই জায়গায় সবচেয়ে বড় আমাদের একটা ঘাটতি আছে and limitation আছে। আমাদের challenges are there certainly, but এসবকে অ্যাড্রেস করার জন্য আমাদের যে পলিটিক্যাল কনসেনসাস সেটাকে সকলের সঙ্গে একযোগে একটা উদার মনোভাব নিয়ে আসতে হবে। আমরা যদি এখানে শুধু মনে করি যে ফ্রি অ্যান্ড ফেয়ার ইলেকশনের মাধ্যমে আমূল পরিবর্তন হবে টুমরো, is just not going to be the case here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zafar. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all of you, and thank you, the panelists. It was a wonderful discussion. Except that, as we all can understand from the discussions, the panelists, the political party representatives here have just reiterated their positions, which means it's a standstill. They have not come to suggest how to get to free and fair elections, how to come to a common ground. So perhaps they need to think this through. If the current government is not in agreement to form a caretaker government, would it consider creating a permanent reform commission for all institutional reforms and create it with draw a mechanism by which you have members of the commission are considered neutral as far as people can be considered neutral, and also create a constitutional court. Many countries in this world who have troublesome elections have constitutional courts, which is the supreme authority to decide on constitutional matters, and it does not have to go to the parliament to resolve these issues. One of the statements that was made was that let us not forget what others have done. This brings me back to 1971. The War of Liberation, immediately after the War of Liberation, people were divided as to who were freedom fighters and who were not. That is where the trouble started to me, because women who fought in the war actually were never recognized as freedom fighters. They were recognized in 40 years. It took 40 years for women to be recognized as freedom fighters. But the point is not who were freedom fighters and who were not. I think we should stop the discussion here today and for all times to come. Those who have fought have received whatever they had to receive, titles, emoluments, whatever. Now this discussion should be stopped. Every Bangladeshi who stayed back is a Bangladeshi, and by default is a freedom fighter in a way. We should be identifying only the Razzaqs and the Al-Badrs and those who actually physically participated in the anti-war movement. And I say this with very humbly, because I come from a family of freedom fighters who lost 3 members of my family. I lost 3 members of my family during the war, and I myself had a bayonet at my back, held by a Pakistani soldier. So it's not that we want recognition as such, but we do want the country to come together as Bangladeshis, not as, for us, with us, or not with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed the conversation up to now very much. I will be very brief, and I want to raise first one question to the people who are representing political parties. I could see that on the on the neutral or non-partisan caretaker government system, there still is not an agreement. But I was very heartened to hear that the Awami League is willing to sit down and talk. So I want to raise another issue, and whether the parties can come to an agreement on that. And that is, can you come to an agreement that whoever gets elected, you will not get back into the winner-take-it-all system. যে আসবে পাওয়ারে সেই সব কিছু ভোগ করবে এবং তারা যারা বিরোধী দলে আছে একেবারে সর্বহারা করে দেবে। কারণ আমার মনে হয় যে that is really the main reason nobody wants to give up power. So before you decide on the neutral government and this and that, is a lack of trust, long litany of, and everything is true. Each party has done this to the other. But can just forget about the form of government, neutral, এই ইস্যু যেটার জন্য আমরা রোটেশন অফ পাওয়ারে যেতেই পাচ্ছি না। যে আসবে তার গোষ্ঠী from top to bottom, গ্রামে-গঞ্জে তারাই সব পাবে, আর বিরোধী দলকে যে কোনোভাবে নিচ্ছে না। বাট ইউ আর অল ফ্রম দ্য সেম ফ্যামিলি, মিনিং আপনারা সবাই পলিটিক্স করছেন, এটা আপনাদের ফ্যামিলি। অতএব এই পলিটিশিয়ান যারা করছে এক প্রফেশনে থেকে এই এগ্রিমেন্টটাতে আসা যায় কিনা, সেটা আমার প্রথম প্রশ্ন। আই উড লাইক টু হিয়ার, কারণ আমার কাছে বহু বছর ধরে মনে হয়েছে যে এই ইস্যুটা যদি আমরা সলভ না করতে পারি তাহলে কিন্তু ভবিষ্যতে আর ফেয়ার ইলেকশন ইনস্ট্রুমেন্টালি ভাবলে কিছু হবে না। সাইড ইস্যু যেখানে আমরা জানি যে সবাই একদল আরেক দলের বিরুদ্ধে এরকম করেছে, তাহলে আমাদের দেশে আমরা কি করব? আমরা কি একটা ট্রুথ কমিশন করব না কি করব আমি জানি না। Second question that I have to all the politicians, including Zonayed, Saki, সেটা হচ্ছে যে এই যে over the years I have lived long enough, I have seen how politics has evolved from 60s. আগে কিন্তু the political parties really didn't have, they had leaders but they didn't have a lot of workers ছিল, কিন্তু এখন আমি যেটা দেখি সব দলেরই, বিশেষ করে বড় দলের অনেক বিশাল কর্মী বাহিনী, লিডার আছে, কর্মী বাহিনী আছে, বাট হোয়ার আর জনতা অর পিপল? আগে আমরা সবসময় বলতাম ছাত্র জনতা, ভাই ভাই কিংবা কিচ্ছু। এখন হোয়াট ইজ, উই আর টকিং অ্যাবাউট স্পেস ফর সিভিল সোসাইটি, দিস অ্যান্ড দ্যাট, জনতার স্পেসটা কোথায় আছে এবং আসলে জনতা কি ভাবছে? কারণ এই যে কনফ্লিক্ট, এবং তারা আগে যেটা করা গেছিল 71-এ, দ্যাট ইট ইজ লিডার্স ওয়ার দেয়ার বাট পিপল স্বতঃস্ফূর্তভাবে ভলান্টারিলি, দ্যাট ইজ হাউ ইউ গেইন দ্য মোমেন্টাম অফ এ মুভমেন্ট। অনেক ভালো আইডিয়াস আমি জুনায়েদ সাকির কাছে শুনলাম, রিফর্মস আইডিয়াস। এটার পিছনে কত সাধারণ লোক কতটা বোঝে? So I just want to know where you have parties, leaders, workers, but where is people and how do you interact with people? সেটা আমার একটু জানবার ইচ্ছা আছে, কারণ আমি আজকাল I don't have that much information about what is going on currently on the ground, কিন্তু আপনারা on the ground আছেন, so I would like to hear a bit of this.
Thank you very much. Dr. Jan, I am going to just apologize to all of the others who have questions, because I know we could have had this conversation for a long time, but we're really running out of time. Maybe this should have been a day-long event. I also was not going to give, we decided that we were going to have closing statements by the panelists, but I think Dr. Jahan has asked some questions, so it would be a good idea just to give everyone 30 seconds to a minute. This is your closing statement. Address the questions, and then I will move towards the summing up. Okay?
Just a second here. Zafar?
Yeah?
May I have your attention, please?
Sure.
Here. Just want to add one more thing. I just forgot that. You know, along with devising the ideas of common ground and how to get to free and fair elections, we really need to have a commitment, political commitment, about not staging any more 21st August in Bangladesh, on the ground of Bangladesh, and 15th August in Bangladesh. That is something we need to be, very careful about, because these are commitments that we need before we embark on any other further political reconciliation process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raju. Go first? Okay. Just 1 minute. I know. Just a minute to address the issues Dr. Jahan brought up and maybe make one closing statement.
As a citizen of this country, it is also at times, we are also maybe at times very baffled, and we are conscious about the disagreements that is happening, and I think consensus is something that we, as an individual, I think consensus is something that I want to see some traction on it. And I think we are all there to make some sort of ground impact on our political agendas and way forward. But I think there needs to be some sort of way that we can actually communicate well. I think we all say that this fraternity, that fraternity, this group needs to be more engaged. The international community needs to be more engaged. I think more so, I think international communities are our partners. Let us keep that there. And they also want to see everyone trying to have consensus. Civil society is a big part of, the whole concept of the liberation war was basically, was created by the student fraternity and the civil society. Let's be honest about it. So, as long as we're open to the idea of discussion, realistic discussion, I think we can make changes happen, and with full commitment that I say that my party is very much willing to have these discussions. We are not closing the door off, but the other parties, I don't want to say opposition or others, but other parties, stakeholders, needs to be also willing to engage with openness so that we can have some consensus. Thank you.
Thank you, Nahim. Sharmeen, final statement, 1 minute.
Yeah, just this one little thing. I hope that this discussion brings home the need for the major political parties to come to a common ground. And I hope that we have strongly reiterated our demand that these political parties sit together, open their doors, and actually dialogue. We cannot afford, and just one thing, if we are going to stay stuck in 1971, please do not misunderstand me. I also come from a family of freedom fighters, and I love my country, and I'm very proud of our war, but I refuse to stay stuck in 1971. This is 2022. Situation has changed. Do you know what my daughter said to me? And I've got to say this to you. After listening to the politicians day in and day out and day in and day out, one day she said to me, you work for human rights and you work for women and you work for elections. You know something? I think your generation has to go before we can have a sensible government, before we can have a governance that is free of all this nonsense. And why did she say that? Because our political parties are actually stuck. They're stuck in 1971. I think it's enough is enough. Let's move forward. We know the mistakes we made. All our political parties know what mistakes they've made. We don't want August 21. We don't want 1975. We don't want 1971, but we do not want another 2018. We do not want, so what is the thing? If elections cannot be held properly under ruling governments, then find an answer. If it is not CTG, caretaker government, it has to be an interim system. And worldwide, there are many countries in the world who have done that. So let's open our doors to truly want, and as I said, if you want a common ground, we've got to agree that we want a common ground, right, Nahim? Right, Rumeen? We've got to want a common ground. Then let's start walking. Thank you.
1 minute, and then Saki.
আমরা যে শুধু 1971 স্টাক হয়ে আছি তাই না, আমরা 15th August 1975 এও স্টাক হয়ে আছি, আমরা 21st August 2004 এও স্টাক হয়ে আছি।
যখন আমরা ডেমোক্রেসির কথা বলি, ফ্রিডম অফ স্পিচের কথা বলি, হিউম্যান রাইটসের কথা বলি, আমরা অ্যাবডাকশন, এনফোর্সড ডিসঅ্যাপিয়ারেন্সের কথা বলি, আমরা টর্চার ইন পুলিশ কাস্টাডির কথা বলি, সাথে সাথে বলা হয় 21 অগস্ট এই হয়েছিল, 15 অগস্ট এই হয়েছিল। ফর গডস সেক, stop using 21st August and 15th August as an excuse. এটা আর না, enough is enough. সম্মানিত রনক জাহান আপা প্রশ্ন করেছিলেন যে আমরা উইনার টেক্স অলের সংস্কৃতি থেকে বের হয়ে আসতে পারবো কিনা। বের হয়ে আসতে হবে, দরকার হলে আমাদের we have to amend our constitution because this constitution gives the whole power to the prime minister. এই দেশে আমরা সেপারেশন অফ পাওয়ারের কথা বলি, আমরা এক্সিকিউটিভ, লেজিসলেটিভ এন্ড জুডিশিয়ারি ইন্ডিপেন্ডেন্সের কথা বলি, বাট ইট ইজ ভেরি মাচ ইন দ্য কনস্টিটিউশন দ্যাট দ্য হোল পাওয়ার লাইজ উইথ দি প্রাইম মিনিস্টার। এই জায়গাটা যদি বদল না আসে, আমাদের পলিটিক্যাল কালচারের মধ্যে বদল আসবে না। এবং আমাদের একটা বিষয় মাথায় রাখতে হবে, যেই আজকে পাওয়ারে থাকি না কেন, কালকে আমাদের অপোজিশনে থাকতে হতে পারে। এটা আওয়ামী লীগ 21 বছর প্রত্যক্ষ করেছে, বিএনপি 15 বছর প্রত্যক্ষ করলো। তো সুতরাং এরপরও যদি শিক্ষা না হয় তাহলে আর কিছু বলার নাই। ধন্যবাদ।
Thank you, Rumeen. Saki, 1 minute.
I'd like to thank Dhaka Tribune, Zafar, Sobhan, and the Norwegian Embassy, Honorable Ambassador here, for having me here. আমি রৌনক আপার, প্রফেসর রৌনক জাহান এক প্রসঙ্গ ধরে একটু কথা বলবো। আমি নাহিম রাজ্জাকের যে বিষয়টা নিয়ে কথা বলতে চাই সেটা হচ্ছে যে উনি মিডিয়ার অ্যাকাউন্টেবিলিটির জন্য ডিএসএ অ্যাক্টের কথা বলেছেন, কিন্তু গভর্নমেন্টের অ্যাকাউন্টেবিলিটির জন্য কোনো কথাই বলতে ওনারা রাজি নন, এবং এইটা আমাদের সবচেয়ে আনফর্চুনেট অ্যাসপেক্ট। আমি যেটা বলতে চাই যে গভর্নমেন্টের অ্যাকাউন্টেবিলিটির প্রশ্নটা যে আমাদের একটা সমস্যা। ধরুন 6 দফা সবাই পড়েছে, বাংলার সমস্ত জনগণ 6 দফা জানতেন, মানে 1 by 1? আমার মনে হয় না জানতেন, কিন্তু 6 দফার মূল এসেন্সটা জানতেন, যে আমরা স্বাধিকার চাই, আমাদের আত্মনিয়ন্ত্রণ চাই। ওইটা মানুষের হার্টকে পৌঁছেছিল। বাংলাদেশের মানুষের কাছে একটা জিনিস অনুভূত হচ্ছে, আমি ভোট দিতে চাই। সম্ভবত মুক্তিযুদ্ধের পরে প্রথমবারের মতো 18 কোটি মানুষ উদ্বেলিত হওয়ার মতো একটা বাংলাদেশের সামনে ইস্যু আছে। এখন এটাকে আমরা কেবলমাত্র পাওয়ার ট্রান্সফার ফ্রম ওয়ান পার্টি টু অ্যানাদার নিতে পারি? আমার মনে হয় না সেটার জন্য মানুষ উদ্বেলিত আছে। মানুষ দেখতে চাচ্ছে একটা সত্যিকার অর্থেই তার ভোটিং রাইটসটা একটা ইলেকশনে না, বারে বারে থাকতে হবে। এখন তার পদ্ধতিগত দিক কি, তার শাসনতান্ত্রিক সংস্কারের দিক কি, ডিটেইল হয়তো মানুষ জানেন না, হয়তো সবগুলো নিয়ে প্রতিটি মানুষ চিন্তা করেন না, কিন্তু যারা চিন্তা করেন তারা যদি এইটা উপলব্ধি না করেন তাহলে আমরা কিন্তু ডেডলকে। এবং এইটা আজকে আমি মনে করি যে বাংলাদেশে সাধারণ মানুষের মধ্যে, আমি নিজে সত্যি সত্যি বিস্মিত, সম্ভবত টক শো, সম্ভবত ইউটিউব, সোশ্যাল মিডিয়ার কারণে মানুষ যত বেশি রাজনীতিকৃত হয়েছে বাংলাদেশে এই সময়ে, এবং তারা অনেক বিষয় নিয়ে যেভাবে এখন চিন্তিত সেটা আগের কোনো সময় হয়নি। ফলে আমরা যদি বাংলাদেশকে, এটা আমি আবারও মনে করি যে বাংলাদেশের সামনে যদি এই অবস্থা চলতে থাকে আমরা বিপজ্জনক গাড্ডার দিকে এগোচ্ছি, আর যদি আমরা এর গণতান্ত্রিক উত্তরণ করতে পারি আমরা ভালো দিকে যাব। আওয়ামী লীগের মতো দলের সেই দিকে আসা উচিত, আর না হলে জনগণের সামনে আর কোনো পথ নাই, সংগ্রাম আন্দোলন করে তার যে ঐতিহাসিক পথ সেই দিকে যাওয়া। জেনারেল শাহেদ আমাকে একটা বলেছিলেন যে আইডিওলজি বেসড পলিটিক্স সম্ভব কিনা, ওইটা একটা আমার ধারণা সম্পূর্ণ ভিন্ন আলোচনা, আপনার সাথে হয়তো পরে কখনো সে বিষয়ে কথা হতে পারে। আমি সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি। থ্যাংক ইউ অল।
Thank you, Saki. And thank you all. Like I said, I think this is a conversation which we could continue for the rest of the day, but unfortunately we are out of time. I apologize to those of you who had wanted to participate, but unfortunately we hadn't have time for everyone. I would just like to say, in summing up, in conclusion, that I want to go back to Sharmeen Murshid's first point with which she opened up our discussion, is that do we really want it? And if we really want it, then of course we can find the common ground. But the first point is we need to want that political common ground, both the party in power and the parties in opposition. Then only we can accomplish this. And so And I think that's a fair question to ask. If we look at the 2014 elections, we look at the 2018 elections. Now, those elections were constitutional, and they have given us a government, and they've given us the last 8 years. And an argument could be made that, okay, we should go on like that. But my sense is that that's not what the ruling party wants. That it's that they want a more participatory election than has happened in the past. And of course, that would be what the opposition would want as well, something more participatory. So we have this commonality, we have this common ground. Question is, how do we get there? And I think this is where Dr. Jahan raised a great point. We need to move away from winner-take-all politics. The ruling party needs to think about and operate from a perspective of how would I act and how would I think if I were in the opposition. Similarly, the opposition parties need to think, if I were the party in power, how would I act? What would my demands be? What would my expectations be? How have I, when I have myself been in power, conducted myself? What steps have I taken? I think asking these questions are absolutely the key to moving forward, because at the end of the day, and this is what Barrister Rumeen said, people don't stay in power and opposition forever. And as long as you kind of have that mindset that we can never lose power, or that the costs of stepping away from power are going to be so great that it's impossible to bear, then I think fundamentally, that a system which recognizes that or is powered by that has a sort of a fundamental problem in calling itself democratic. The heart of democracy, and everyone believes in democracy when you win, but the heart of democracy is to accept it when you lose. And I think in neither party, frankly, have I actually seen this if I look at the history of the last several decades. And I think this is something both parties and all opposition parties, anyone who's a political player, needs to really internalize. And once we understand this, we can talk. I really appreciated what Saki had to say in terms of the 7 points he raised for reform. And maybe that is what we need. Maybe we need massive reform. Whether that reform needs to be done through the aegis of a caretaker government, a neutral government, interim government. Maybe we're talking about a constitutional convention. Maybe we're talking about a constitutional court. But let's have these discussions. Let's talk about a sustainable, long-term, as permanent as possible answer. Nothing in politics stays the same. Every decade is different. The challenges of each generation, of each decade are new. It's quite possible that the systems and structures we've had in place, which have seen us well over the past decades, do need to be reimagined, do need to be discussed, do need to be reformed. Let's have these discussions, and let's all sit down around a table and move forward on this. I'm really glad we could have this conversation. Like I said, it is a year before, more than a year before elections have been called in January 2024, but I do believe that this is the time to have these discussions, because there is really so much which needs to be worked through if we want to get to a place where all Bangladeshis want to get to, where all Bangladeshi people deserve. So thank you very much for your time, and let's keep this conversation going. Thank you.